What if everything you call you, the thoughts that arrive like strangers, the memories stitched together like fragile film reels, the feelings that swell and collapse, wasn't resting on anything solid at all? What if consciousness is not a grand cathedral housing the soul, nor a deep well of hidden essence, but merely a mirror, polished, flawless and cold, reflecting whatever passes before it, without holding anything of its own? What if everything you call you, the thoughts that arrive like strangers, the memories stitched together like fragile film reels, the feelings that swell and collapse, wasn't resting on anything solid at all? What if consciousness is not a grand cathedral housing the soul, nor a deep well of hidden essence, but merely a mirror, polished, flawless and cold, reflecting whatever passes before it, without holding anything of its own? The mirror does not think, and yet it shows you an image. The mirror does not remember, and yet it convinces you of continuity. The mirror does not choose, and yet it catches the dance of choices. And behind the mirror, nothing. No machinery, no secret keeper, no foundation, only the quiet void. In this journey, we will walk through the unsettling possibility that your mind is a reflection without a source, a surface without depth. And we will ask again and again what it means to live if consciousness itself is nothing but an echo of light with nothing behind it. Stand in front of the mirror again. At first, everything seems whole. Your face stares back, your outline intact, your eyes aligned. But stay long enough, and the edges tremble. The image starts to betray itself. A flicker, a distortion, a subtle shift, as if the glass were tired of holding coherence. This is the strangeness of perception. What you take as seamless solidity can begin to fracture, revealing the fragile machinery beneath. Images break apart, not because the mirror has failed, but because your mind can no longer enforce unity upon the fragments. Now extend this to consciousness itself. What you call your continuous experience, this smooth unfolding of thoughts, memories, sensations, relies on a stitching process so delicate, it must remain invisible. The moment you look too closely, cracks appear. A memory contradicts itself. A thought feels alien, as if whispered from somewhere you cannot trace. A feeling surges and dissolves before you can claim it. The illusion of wholeness shatters, and what is left is something closer to shards of glass scattered across the floor. Cognitive science has a name for this disjointedness: confabulation. The brain invents narratives to cover gaps in awareness, stitching together fragments so quickly that you rarely notice the seams. Consider patients with memory loss, who confidently recall events that never occurred, or those with neurological damage who insist their paralyzed limb can move. These are not anomalies. They are extreme cases of what all consciousness does. Every day, your mind fills in the gaps with fragments, convincing you of continuity. Yet beneath the story lies broken images, each fragment carrying the shimmer of reality, but never the substance. Think of dreams. You drift into a narrative that feels whole while inside it. You walk through cities, talk to strangers, feel the heat of the sun, but on waking, the fragments scatter, a face without a name, a door leading to nowhere, a voice speaking a sentence you cannot finish. Dreams reveal the fragility of coherence. They are images that convince you of reality, until the moment they dissolve, leaving only pieces that refuse to form a whole. What if waking life is no different? What if your daily consciousness is a dream that has merely mastered the art of hiding its seams? And yet, the self resists this recognition. You want to believe you are whole. You want to trust that behind the reflections lies a center, holding everything together. But notice how easily that faith wavers when confronted with psychological experiments. In change blindness studies, observers fail to notice when entire features of a scene alter before their eyes. A man's shirt shifts color. A door changes shape. A face is replaced with another. And still the witness insists nothing has changed. The brain insists on wholeness even as images break apart beneath its gaze. What happens then, if you admit the truth? That the self you defend so fiercely is not a continuous identity, but a collage, held together by the fragile glue of attention. The cracks are always there, just smoothed over. The laughter you remember from childhood, the grief you felt last year, the decision you made yesterday. Are they truly part of the same you, or fragments reflected on the same surface, mistaken for a continuous image? If the mirror shows them all, does that make them connected, or merely juxtaposed in a way that convinces you of unity? Philosophy circles this endlessly. David Hume, centuries ago, confessed that when he looked inward, he found no self, only a bundle of perceptions. Modern neuroscience echoes him. There is no central controller in the brain, no single theater of consciousness. Instead, scattered networks flash, compete, overlap. Out of this storm, images arise, temporary, persuasive, fragile. They are convincing in their immediacy, but destined to break apart the moment you press on their foundations. But perhaps the breaking is not a failure. Perhaps it is revelation. When the image fractures, you glimpse the truth that there was never substance behind it. Like a mirror cracked down the center, the reflection was always an illusion of solidity. And in that fracture, something liberating emerges. If you are nothing but fragments, then you are not bound to hold yourself together. The self becomes fluid, unfixed, endlessly reassembled. You are not a prison of continuity. You are a shifting collage, beautiful because it can break. Yet the paradox deepens. If everything is fragments, then who is watching them break apart? If your identity is a scattered pile of reflections, what is it that feels the disintegration? The watcher itself may be one more fragment, an image of stability projected into the mirror, convincing you that someone is standing behind the glass, when in truth there is no one there at all. The mirror reflects itself endlessly, each shard pretending to be the witness of the others, until the hall of images collapses into silence. And so you sit here, listening, holding on to these words, as if they were whole, as if this narrative itself were not fragments strung together across the fragile thread of your attention. But notice how quickly a sentence dissolves once read, how each phrase vanishes into memory before the next appears. Even now, images are breaking apart, scattered behind you like shards of glass on the floor, convincing you of a wholeness that cannot hold. When you stand before a mirror, you expect something, your face, your body, your outline, and yet no matter how carefully you lean in, no matter how close you press your gaze into the silver surface, what you see is not really there. The reflection has no weight, no warmth, no pulse. It is an image with perfect immediacy and zero presence. This is the paradox we rarely confront. Reflections appear convincing, but they are built from nothing. Now imagine that your consciousness, the very seat of your experience, the theater where your thoughts and feelings rise, is exactly this, a reflection without substance. Each thought that drifts into awareness is not a solid object moving across a real stage, but a shimmer on the surface of a mirror that holds nothing behind it. The feeling of hunger, the sudden stab of jealousy, the ache of nostalgia, each arrives like a face pressed to the glass. It seems present, undeniable, but if you try to reach through awareness, if you try to grasp the thing itself, you find only a surface with no depth. This is not a mystical claim. Cognitive science and philosophy alike have long toyed with the idea that consciousness does not contain anything. Daniel Dennett's multiple drafts theory, for example, suggests that what you call consciousness is not a single container of experience, but the illusion of continuity arising from competing processes. Thomas Metzinger argues that the self itself is a kind of transparent model, an image we mistake for a reality. In both accounts, there is no substance behind the reflection. The brain generates patterns, those patterns cast an image, and we mistake the image for the thing. But to feel this possibility directly is unsettling. Consider the quiet moment when you are half awake, still suspended between sleep and morning. Thoughts slide across your mind, yet they feel hollow, as though someone else has placed them there. Or the experience of déjà vu, where familiarity arrives, stripped of origin. In both cases, consciousness shows you something, but offers nothing to hold on to, a reflection without substance. And here is where the paradox thickens. If your consciousness is nothing but reflections, then what are you, the self you cling to? The one who remembers birthdays, holds grudges, and makes promises, might be just another reflection playing across this surface, a loop of echoes without a voice, a shimmer of meaning with no anchor beneath. This would mean you are not an entity watching from behind the glass, but the glass itself, endlessly replaying whatever stands before it. Philosophers of mind often describe the hard problem of consciousness as the question of why subjective experience exists at all. But imagine inverting the question. What if experience itself does not exist in the way we think it does? What if the feeling of being is simply a persistent reflection, an echo convincing enough to be mistaken for substance? In this model, there is no hard problem, only a trick of the mirror convincing itself it is solid. Psychology provides strange evidence here. In split brain experiments, where the corpus callosum is severed, patients exhibit behaviors that suggest two separate streams of consciousness operating independently. One hand does something the other denies. One eye sees something the other cannot acknowledge. And yet, when asked, the patient always constructs a story, as if a single unified self has remained intact. The reflection stitches itself into coherence, even when the substance is gone. You can test this fragility yourself. Look into a mirror and hold your gaze until your features blur. Soon, distortions arrive. Faces shift, melt, fragment. The mind begins projecting phantoms. This phenomenon, known as the strange face illusion, reveals how unstable reflections truly are. Your brain struggles to maintain the integrity of an image, and in the process, exposes the fact that the reflection was never a fixed reality in the first place. Consciousness may function exactly this way, forever improvising coherence upon a surface that has nothing behind it. And yet, here you are, listening to these words, nodding perhaps, feeling the rhythm of thought as if it flows from something deeper. But what if that sense of depth is itself a reflection, a copy of a copy, an illusion of substance created because the mirror cannot help but shine back what it receives? Imagine if even your agreement, your doubt, your curiosity right now are not products of a hidden soul, but simply the mirror doing what mirrors do, reflecting without possessing. What does this mean for your life? It could mean that the things you grasp for, certainty, identity, permanence, were never yours to hold. They are reflections. They shimmer in front of you but dissolve the moment you reach through. But perhaps this is not despair. Perhaps it is liberation. If there is no substance to the reflection, then nothing binds you to the stories you tell about yourself, the failures you replay, the identities you cling to, the wounds you believe define you. What if these too are only reflections? Images convincing in their vividness, but empty once you peer behind the glass. And still, the paradox lingers. If everything is reflection, then who is it that notices the reflection? If there is nothing behind the mirror, who or what is reading these words, feeling their weight, sensing their echo? Are you the image, the surface, the glass itself, or the absence behind it? Perhaps the answer is that there is no answer. Only reflection upon reflection, illusion upon illusion, a hall of mirrors with no origin, no final witness, no substance at all. If consciousness is a reflection without substance, then reality itself might be a theater of mirrors, a place where light bounces endlessly, never finding an anchor, always convincing us of presence while holding nothing behind. And perhaps, when the last thought fades, the mirror will not shatter. It will simply fall silent, still capable of reflecting, but with nothing left to pass across its surface. Imagine standing in a darkened room, lit only by a single candle behind a pane of glass. The flame flickers, but what you see is not the flame itself, only the shadows it casts. Distorted outlines, moving phantoms, half-real shapes. Consciousness may be no different, not the flame of a soul burning brightly, but shadows on glass, thin silhouettes dancing across a surface, convincing you of depth where none exists. The metaphor of shadows behind glass is not poetic excess. It is how neuroscience itself begins to describe awareness. When sensory data floods into the brain, it is filtered, distorted, translated. The reality you think you perceive is not the thing itself, but a shadow of it, a model projected onto the inner screen of consciousness. You do not see the world directly. You see a shadow world, constructions of light, color, memory and prediction, cast upon the surface of awareness. But the shadows deceive you. They appear to have substance. They feel weighty, urgent, alive. You trust them because they move in rhythm with your actions, because they echo your touch, because they mirror your hunger and fear. Yet behind the glass, there is nothing you can reach. The flame that casts them is not accessible to you. You live in the shadow realm, a prisoner of reflection. Think of Plato's allegory of the cave, where prisoners mistake shadows on the wall for reality. Consciousness may be the same, except the cave is your own mind, and the wall is the glass of awareness. The shadows you watch, your thoughts, your feelings, your identity, are not the true flame. But unlike Plato's prisoners, you cannot step outside to glimpse the fire. All you have ever known are the shadows. Psychologists point to illusions as evidence of this shadow play. In the hollow mask illusion, a concave face appears convex, because the brain insists on seeing it as a normal human face. In the Miller-Lyer illusion, lines of equal length appear unequal. These are shadows bending themselves, revealing that what you see is not truth but projection. If the senses deceive so easily, how much more fragile is the sense of self, the belief that I exists as a solid entity rather than as another shadow dancing on glass. Consider memory. You believe you recall events directly, but neuroscience shows memory is reconstructive. Each time you remember, you redraw the shadow, altering it slightly, introducing distortions. Over time, the memory bears little resemblance to the original flame, yet it feels as vivid as ever. Your past is not substance, but shadows replayed on the glass of consciousness, shadows that change even as you insist they remain the same. And what of emotion? Anger surges, joy floods, grief weighs heavy, each feels overwhelming, as if rooted in something deep and unshakable. Yet emotions too are shadows, chemical flickers translated into perception. They pass as quickly as they arrive, yet while present, they seem absolute. Behind the glass, however, there is no enduring anger, no permanent joy, only shadows that stretch, distort, vanish. Here lies the paradox. If consciousness is only shadows, then what is casting them? Some argue it is the brain, a vast network of neurons firing in patterns that throw silhouettes onto the screen of awareness. Others argue there is no flame at all, that the shadows are self-sustaining, loops of reflection with no original source. But whether flame or loop, the truth remains, you do not touch the source. You see only what the glass allows, and you call this shadow play your life. Think of those moments when shadows betray themselves, when déjà vu floods you with familiarity without cause, when hallucinations slip into your field of view, when dreams spill over into waking life. In those moments, the glass reveals its fragility. The shadows no longer align with the world, and yet you are forced to confront the fact that even your normal perceptions might be just as untrustworthy, just as detached from substance. And still, you cling to them. You call the shadows me. You weave them into narratives. You defend them as if they were solid ground. But what happens if you let go? What if you admit that your identity, your story, your sense of being is nothing more than shadows behind glass? It may sound terrifying, but it might also be freedom, because shadows are not bound. They do not hold weight. They shift, they change, they dissolve. And if you too are nothing more than a shifting play of shadows, then perhaps you are not trapped by the heaviness of existence, but freed by its weightlessness. Yet, the paradox deepens further. If all you are is shadow, who is it that notices the shadow? If your mind is glass, and your self is reflection, who is the one seeing the dance? Perhaps there is no seer at all. Perhaps the very sense of watching is another shadow, the most convincing one of all. The mirror reflects a figure watching the reflection, and you mistake this loop for a witness, when in truth there is only the endless play of shadows upon glass. So here you sit, listening, reflecting, nodding perhaps, and even now shadows flicker. The meaning you think you grasp, the insight you feel pressing in, the unease that spreads like a chill. These too are shadows. They appear vivid, convincing, but behind them, nothing, only glass, only a surface, ready to reflect whatever passes, but holding nothing of its own. There is a voice inside you that insists it is watching. It whispers, I am here, I see, I know. It feels like a silent witness sitting in the center of your mind, untouched by thought, yet aware of everything that passes through it. This voice convinces you that behind the reflections, behind the shadows, there is a core self, the observer who remains. But what if that voice itself is hollow? What if the observer is not a presence but another reflection, another echo, another trick of the mirror pretending to be substance? This is the unsettling possibility, that there is no watcher behind experience. What you call the observer is only another construct, one more image cast upon the surface of consciousness. Consider how thoughts arise. Do you summon them? Do you know where they begin? No. They appear, unbidden. A memory flashes, a song lyric drifts in, a plan for tomorrow sketches itself out. The observer then claims ownership. I thought that, but did it? Or was the thought simply another shadow, arising and dissolving, with the observer stepping in after the fact to take credit? Cognitive neuroscience hints at this hollowness. In experiments measuring readiness potential, the brain's electrical activity before conscious decisions, researchers found that actions are initiated milliseconds before you are aware of deciding them. You press a button, move a finger, choose a color, but the brain has already started the process before the you, who observes, claims to have chosen. The observer is not the initiator. It is the afterimage, the ghost who takes the bow once the play has already begun. If the observer is hollow, then what does that make you? You have lived believing that the witness is the bedrock of your being, that no matter what changes, this silent watcher endures. But imagine discovering it is only a phantom, a placeholder created by the brain to maintain the illusion of continuity, a hollow mask placed upon the mirror, convincing you that someone stands behind the glass when in truth it is empty. Think of those times when awareness slips. You drive for miles without remembering the journey, your body responding, your hands steering, your feet braking, all without an observer directing, or those moments when you speak and surprise yourself with the words that spill out as though they arrived from somewhere else. These experiences reveal the absence of the observer. Life moves, actions unfold, and only afterward does a hollow voice rise to say, "I was watching all along." Philosophy has circled this for centuries. The Buddhist doctrine of anatta, or no self, insists that the observer is an illusion. There is perception but no perceiver, thought but no thinker, experience but no experiencer. The hollow observer is perhaps the most convincing illusion of all, because it insists on its own solidity. It tells you it is watching, but a shadow can say the same. An echo can repeat those words, convincing in their resonance, yet hollow at their core. But notice the paradox. If the observer is hollow, who is it that notices the hollowness? If there is no witness, how do you know these words? Perhaps this, too, is illusion. Perhaps the very sense of knowing is another reflection, a hall of mirrors, where each surface reflects the idea of a watcher, but behind them is only emptiness. You search for the seer, but all you find are more images pretending to see. And yet, the illusion persists, because it is useful. The hollow observer provides a sense of stability in the chaos of perception. It convinces you of agency, of continuity, of a narrative self who chooses and remembers. Without it, life might feel like fragments spinning in void. The brain constructs the hollow observer, not to deceive maliciously, but to make the flood of experience survivable. It is a mask that hides the emptiness, a shadow that comforts you into believing someone is there to hold it all together. But what happens if you take the mask off? What if you stare into the mirror and admit that the observer is hollow? At first, terror may rise. To lose the watcher feels like losing existence itself, but perhaps freedom lies there too. If the observer is hollow, then the burden of carrying a fixed self disappears. You are not trapped as the watcher. You are the watching itself, free to dissolve, free to shift, free to reflect without being bound to substance. Think of a hollow shell washed ashore. It appears whole, intricate, beautiful. You lift it to your ear, and inside you hear the echo of the ocean. But the shell contains nothing. It is empty, yet it sings. Consciousness may be no different. The hollow observer is the shell, and the echo you hear, "I am here, I am watching," is not proof of substance but the resonance of emptiness itself. So as you sit with these words, notice how the observer inside you leans forward, insisting it is real. Notice how it claims, "I am listening, I am considering, I am deciding whether to agree," and ask, is that true? Or is that claim itself another echo, another hollow song in an empty shell? If you press against it, you will find no core, only reflection, only resonance, only the hollow observer, endlessly pretending to be the one who watches. When you open your eyes, the world arrives instantly. Colors spill into view, sounds press against your ears, textures meet your skin. It feels immediate, effortless, certain. You believe perception delivers reality directly into your awareness, as though there were a transparent pipeline from world to mind. Yet beneath this ease lies a disturbing question. What if perception has no true core? What if every sight, every sound, every sensation is only surface, reflections stitched together with nothing solid underneath? Neuroscience suggests this possibility with unnerving clarity. When light strikes your eyes, it does not bring the world inside. It is broken down into signals, patterns of electrical impulses traveling through neural circuits. These signals are processed, interpreted, and reconstructed until, finally, they form an image in awareness. But what you see is not the world itself. It is a model, a projection. The brain never touches reality. It handles codes, constructs shadows, assembles illusions. And at the heart of this process lies not a stable core, but endless translation. Consider how fragile perception really is. A single trick of context can alter what you see. In the checker-shadow illusion, two squares of identical shade appear drastically different, simply because the brain insists on correcting for lighting. In the McGurk effect, what you hear changes depending on the shape of a speaker's lips. Even when the sound remains constant, perception is not direct access to reality but a collage, layers of interpretation stitched together, convincing enough to pass as truth. The core you think is solid vanishes when examined. Now turn inward. The same holds for your inner experiences. The warmth of nostalgia, the sharpness of pain, the pull of desire. They feel as though they rise from some deep center of being, but each is mediated, filtered, constructed. A memory of childhood resurfaces, but it has already been rewritten 1,000 times, altered by every recall. Pain signals race to the brain, but their intensity is shaped by expectation, mood, belief. Desire blooms not from an essential self, but from circuits, hormones, patterns learned and rehearsed. You call these experiences authentic, but their authenticity does not mean solidity. Their core is empty, assembled projections reflected in the mirror of consciousness. Philosophers have long noticed this absence. Immanuel Kant argued that we never perceive the thing in itself, only phenomena filtered through the structures of mind. Edmund Husserl noted that perception is always partial, never whole, always pointing beyond itself to something unseen, and contemporary thinkers echo the same conclusion. There is no core, only appearance, endlessly deferred. Consciousness does not deliver reality. It delivers a usable simulation, convincing enough to survive in but hollow at its center. But how does this feel when you press against it directly? Imagine staring into someone's eyes. For a moment, you sense connection, depth, the presence of another consciousness. Yet keep looking, and strangeness intrudes. The eyes are not windows to the soul, but moving surfaces of muscle and light. The depth you feel is your projection, your narrative stitched upon surfaces. The intimacy is real, but its core may not be. Even in the most human encounters, perception reveals itself as reflection, vivid, powerful, but empty at its base. The paradox is that you cannot live without this emptiness. If perception's core were solid, you would be overwhelmed. Reality in its raw form, if such a thing exists, might be too chaotic, too unfiltered, too vast to endure. The brain gives you shadows and surfaces precisely so that you can act, decide, move. The emptiness of perception is not a flaw, but a necessity. You survive not by seeing the world, but by seeing an edited version of it. And so the hollow center becomes the condition of your life. Still, the recognition unsettles. If perception is empty at its core, then what does it mean to trust your own experience? The colors you cherish, the sounds you love, the faces you long for, are they anything more than convincing illusions reflected in the glass of awareness? Perhaps meaning itself arises not from substance, but from the dance of surfaces. Perhaps the beauty of a sunset is not the sun, nor the sky, but the shimmer of interpretation cast upon your mind. Perhaps love itself is not an essence, but the echo of reflections convincing you of depth where none lies. Yet here is the deeper loop. If perception is hollow, then what about the one who perceives? If there is no core in what you see, perhaps there is no core in the seer either. The act of seeing, and the sense of being a seer, may both be reflections, mirrored illusions playing across an empty surface. There is no foundation, only the recursive loop of image and witness, each reflecting the other, neither with substance at its base. You might feel disoriented reading this, as though the ground beneath your experience is thinning. That unease is not an error. It is the truth of perception's empty core pressing against your certainty. And yet, notice the unease itself is perception, a sensation, a reflection, a movement across the mirror. It feels heavy, but it too is hollow. Even the discomfort of confronting emptiness is itself empty. So you are left here, in a world of surfaces, living inside a reflection that pretends to be solid. You reach for the core, but your hand closes on nothing. You search for depth, but you find only glass. And perhaps that is the final lesson, that to live is not to hold substance, but to dance among reflections, to let the emptiness of perception become the mirror in which everything appears and disappears, endlessly, without ever revealing what lies behind. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen. Beneath the sounds of the world, the hum of machines, the stir of air, the faint rhythm of your own breath, there is another presence, the echo of your own awareness. It is subtle, ghost-like, difficult to pin down. You are not hearing the world alone. You are also hearing the fact that you hear. This doubling is the strange hallmark of consciousness. Every experience carries its own faint reflection, an echo that insists, I am here, I am aware. But what if those echoes are all there is? What if awareness itself is nothing but reverberation in an empty chamber? Think of shouting into a canyon. The sound rebounds, layering upon itself until the original call is indistinguishable from the echoes. Awareness may be similar. A thought arises. I feel hungry. But almost immediately, another layer forms. I am aware that I feel hungry. The second statement feels like confirmation of depth, as if there is a witness behind the thought, but perhaps it is only an echo, a reflection of the first statement bouncing off the walls of consciousness. There is no watcher behind the sound, only reverberation that convinces you of presence. This recursive structure defines much of your mental life. You are not simply sad. You are aware of being sad. You are not simply joyful. You know that you are joyful. The echo adds a shimmer of selfhood, as though awareness stands apart from experience. Yet neuroscience suggests this layering arises from feedback loops in the brain, circuits monitoring other circuits, processes, checking the outputs of other processes. Awareness is not a deep witness, but a looped reflection, a system echoing itself. Remove the loop, and the experience remains, but the echo of self-awareness dissolves. Consider the odd fragility of these echoes. In moments of flow when playing music, painting, or running, awareness seems to vanish. You are immersed, present, acting without self-reflection. Later you recall the experience as profound, but at the time, the echo of I am aware fell silent. Conversely, in moments of anxiety, the echoes multiply. You are not only worried, you are worried about being worried, and then worried about worrying about worry. The reverberations stack, filling the chamber until they drown the original note. In both extremes, the truth emerges. Awareness is not substance but echo, not core but reverberation. Philosophers have circled this endlessly. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that consciousness is always self-aware, but not as an object. It is aware of itself only as a transparent echo. Buddhist thinkers noted the same centuries earlier. The mind reflects itself without finding anything behind the reflection. This is the paradox. Awareness feels like proof of a witness, yet when you look for the witness, you find only more echoes. Think of dreams again. Sometimes in the dream you suddenly realize, I am dreaming. That moment feels like awakening within the dream. But even there, the echo is deceiving. The dream self believes it has discovered awareness, yet the real dreamer lies asleep, unaware. The echo convinces you of depth, while still being part of the surface. In waking life, the same trick unfolds. You think I am aware of this moment, but perhaps you are only dreaming awareness, caught in another loop of reflection. But the echoes do more than deceive. They also sustain you. Without them, the continuity of self would collapse. Memory, identity, responsibility, all depend on the reverberations of awareness. You recall not only events but the sense of having been aware during them. This layering weaves a story of me across time. The story feels solid, but it is stitched together by echoes. Remove the reverberation, and the narrative unravels. Yet notice the hollowness of even this continuity. Each echo fades quickly. You cannot hold on to the exact sense of awareness from 5 minutes ago, much less 5 years. What remains are traces, fading reverberations, convincing enough to feel like depth but empty when examined. Your awareness now is not the same as your awareness. Then, it is a new echo, convincing you that it is continuous with the old. Continuity is not substance but repetition of hollowness. There are moments when the chamber reveals itself. In meditation, when you attempt to watch awareness itself, you may notice how slippery it is. You try to observe the observer, but instead you find only the echo of observation. Then another echo. I am aware that I am aware. The regress continues endlessly, like mirrors facing mirrors. You never find the origin. You never find substance. Only echoes fading into silence. But perhaps silence is the point. If awareness is echo, then the silence behind it is what allows the echo to be heard at all. The void gives the reverberation its stage. Without emptiness, no sound would carry. Without hollowness, no awareness could echo. To be conscious, then, is not to have substance but to resonate within a chamber that is itself empty. So ask yourself, as you listen to these words, what do you hear? The meaning, the rhythm, or the faint whisper behind them? The echo that says, I am here, taking this in. That whisper feels like you. But what if it is only another reflection? What if your very sense of existence is nothing but the echo of awareness, reverberating endlessly inside an empty chamber, with nothing behind it? Stand before a mirror, and look into your own eyes. The reflection gazes back, and something inside you insists there is depth behind the pupils, behind the face, behind the glass. You cannot resist this pull. Depth feels inevitable, as if the image opens into a hidden world. But if you press your hand against the mirror, if you lean forward, the illusion collapses. There is no behind. There is only surface. Consciousness may work in precisely the same way. It presents itself as deep, layered, infinite. But what if that sense of depth is an illusion created by surfaces reflecting themselves? The brain is a master of generating depth from flatness. You see it in stereoscopic vision, where two flat images from your eyes are fused into the experience of 3 dimensions. You see it in paintings, where clever lines and shading trick you into perceiving distance. Even sound, arriving in your ears as pressure waves, is rendered into landscapes of direction and space. The mind invents depth so convincingly that you forget it is invention. Consciousness itself might be the ultimate masterpiece of this trick. The illusion that there is something beneath awareness, when in fact there may be only flat reflections. Think of how memory contributes to this illusion. You recall moments from the past and feel they are stored somewhere within you, held in the depths of your being. But neuroscientists remind us that memories are not stored intact. They are reconstructed each time, pieced together from traces scattered across the brain. The sense of memory's depth comes not from a stable archive, but from the illusion that reconstruction equals continuity. You believe you carry an inner reservoir of experience, but perhaps you are only reflecting fragments, stitched together on the surface of awareness. The same illusion arises in identity. You tell yourself you are someone with depth, values, personality, history, an inner truth waiting to be uncovered. Yet examine closely, and identity shifts like sand. In one context, you are generous, in another selfish. To one person, you appear kind, to another, cruel. There is no consistent depth to uncover. There are only surfaces reflecting circumstances, convincing you of solidity through repetition. The illusion of depth is a story the mirror tells to keep you believing it holds more than glass. Philosophers have long warned of this trap. Friedrich Nietzsche called the self a fiction layered over chaos, a mask worn so convincingly that it pretends to hide a face behind it. Jane Baudrillard argued that modern life is dominated by simulacra, copies with no original, reflections that simulate depth while concealing their emptiness. In both visions, depth is not something you can reach. It is an effect, an illusion produced by endless reflection. And yet, this illusion has power. It is what convinces you that your life has continuity, that your choices emerge from some inner wellspring, that love or grief or meaning arises from a core you can trust. Without this illusion, everything would flatten. The stories you tell about yourself, the sense of growing, of learning, of becoming, these would dissolve into scattered reflections. Perhaps this is why the brain sustains the illusion so fiercely, because a world without depth feels unbearable, even if the depth is nothing more than projection. But glimpses of the truth break through. In meditation, when you look for the self, you often find nothing tangible, only thoughts, sensations, memories, each arising and passing. The illusion of depth begins to fray. In déjà vu, you sense familiarity without origin, a feeling of depth that has no actual source. In dissociation, the self feels paper-thin, like a mask about to peel away. These moments reveal the possibility that what you call depth is not essence but effect, not substance but shimmer. The paradox is unavoidable. If depth is an illusion, then even this insight becomes suspect. The recognition that there is no depth can itself feel deep. You may nod, feeling the weight of the realization. But notice what just happened. The surface created another illusion of depth, another echo convincing you of profundity. Awareness reflects itself endlessly, generating the experience of depth precisely where none exists. The illusion sustains itself even as you try to dismantle it. Still, there may be freedom in this recognition. If depth is illusion, you need not cling to the idea of having a fixed core, a hidden essence, a truth that defines you. You are not a secret waiting to be uncovered. You are reflections in motion, endlessly shifting surfaces. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps beauty lies not in what hides beneath, but in the shimmering play upon the glass. A sunset has no depth beyond the light scattering in the atmosphere, yet it moves you. A song has no core beyond vibrations in air, yet it fills you. Depth is not required for meaning, only the illusion of it. So here you sit, reflecting on your own mind, sensing depth in these words, perhaps feeling a pull into something profound. But remember, the profundity is illusion. The sense of descending into meaning is itself a reflection generated by awareness, an echo of surfaces pretending to be depths. Behind it, There is no chamber, no reservoir, no final truth. There is only glass, only reflection, only the illusion of depth. You have seen them before, faces that drift into your awareness without explanation, a stranger passing in a dream, a half-remembered expression flickering in memory, the crowd of people you imagine when someone says the word audience. These faces feel real, vivid, intimate, and yet they have no origin. They appear in the mirror of consciousness, fully formed, yet behind them lies nothing, no history, no anchor, no source. Psychologists call this the phenomenon of cryptomnesia, when the mind produces an idea or image, but mistakes it as original, forgetting its true source. A melody resurfaces, and you believe you've created it. A face flashes, and you believe it is new, but it may be stitched from fragments of countless others. But what if even the faces you hold most dear, the familiar smile of a loved one, the face you call your own, are not grounded in a stable origin? What if every face is only a reflection cast upon the surface of awareness, never owned, never sourced, always borrowed? Consider dreams. Night after night, you encounter people, some known, some invented. Their faces feel specific, alive, yet neuroscientists suggest that dream faces are often composites, assembled from fragments of memory, imagination, and random noise. They seem to stand before you, but they do not exist beyond the dream. When you wake, their origin evaporates. They were never there, faces without origin. But waking life is not immune. The phenomenon of prosopagnosia, face blindness, shows how fragile identity is. Those with this condition cannot recognize even familiar faces. Each time they see their own child, their own spouse, it feels like a stranger. Recognition collapses, and with it the illusion of continuity. This reveals something unsettling. The sense of knowing a face is not a given. It is a construction, an act of reflection performed by the brain. Without that construction, even the dearest face becomes originless, unmoored, another mask without depth. And then there is your own face. You assume it is the most solid of all, the one reflection you can trust. Yet even this is unstable. Look in the mirror long enough, and the strange face illusion occurs. Your features begin to distort, morph, fragment. You see other faces flicker across your own, as if the mirror refuses to hold you still. The reflection you thought was fixed reveals itself as a shifting surface, containing not one face but many, none with a stable origin. Philosophers wrestle with this truth in subtler ways. Emmanuel Levinas suggested that the face of the other calls you into ethical responsibility. But what if the face itself is not grounded? What if the ethical pull arises, not from substance, but from reflection, an echo that convinces you of depth where none exists? Postmodern thought goes further, suggesting that identity itself is a mask worn without a face beneath. In this view, all faces are without origin, projections upon projections, reflections layered upon glass. Think about memory again. When you recall the face of a loved one, do you see them as they are now, or as they were? Do you remember the way they looked yesterday, last year, in childhood? Each recall is a reconstruction, a painting on water, and each time the face changes slightly. Over years, the original vanishes, replaced by echoes of echoes. You believe you remember, but what you hold is not a source. It is a reflection, endlessly redrawn. The paradox deepens. If every face is without origin, then what does it mean to recognize yourself? When you picture me, when you imagine your own face, what do you actually see? An image from a mirror, a photograph, a reflection others have offered you through their reactions. You may believe you own your face, but perhaps it is only a shifting mask, borrowed from perception, maintained by reflection, with no true anchor behind it. This hollowness can be terrifying. If no face has origin, then identity itself is unstable. You cannot point to one image and say, "This is who I am." Yet there is liberation here too. If every face is reflection, you are not trapped by any one of them. You can shift, change, dissolve. You can be many without being bound to one. The mirror does not cling to the images it reflects, neither must you cling to the faces that pass across your awareness. Notice how this realization reverberates in your daily life. Think of all the masks you wear, professional, familial, social. Each one feels like a role, a face put on for the world. Yet beneath them, you search for the real you, the true face. But what if there is none? What if the search is endless, because the origin does not exist? You are not hiding behind the masks. You are the masks themselves, endlessly shifting, endlessly reflected. And yet, Even now, a paradox arises. As you read these words, a voice inside insists, "But my face is real, my identity has depth. I know who I am." That insistence itself is another reflection, another mask convincing you of origin. But press against it, and you will find glass. Behind it, nothing. Only the play of images, convincing in their vividness, empty at their base. So here you are, surrounded by faces, including your own. You trust them, you cling to them, you let them guide your life. But perhaps all faces are like dream figures, convincing for a time, vivid in their appearance, but ultimately faces without origin, reflections cast on glass, destined to dissolve the moment you look for what lies behind. Imagine two mirrors facing one another. Place yourself between them and watch, as your image stretches out endlessly, a corridor of reflections receding into infinity. Each image seems to lead to another, deeper and deeper, yet none of them holds substance. They are copies of copies, shadows of shadows, each dependent on the others for existence. There is no final reflection, no ultimate origin, only the illusion of infinity produced by repetition. Consciousness may be exactly this, a mirror reflecting itself, convinced of depth because the corridor appears endless, though in truth nothing lies beyond the glass. The infinite mirror has haunted philosophers and mystics alike. It appears profound, even sacred. To look into it feels like staring into eternity, as though the self has opened into something vast. Yet the truth is more unsettling. The infinity you see is not an actual depth. It is surface endlessly repeating. Each layer is as shallow as the last, yet together they simulate infinity. Consciousness too may be nothing but this trick. Awareness reflecting awareness, thought noticing thought, self echoing self, until the illusion of infinity overwhelms you. Think of self-awareness. When you notice a thought, "I am sad," another thought arises, "I know I am sad." This recursive loop feels like depth, as if an inner observer has been revealed. But add another layer, "I know that I know I am sad," and then another. The regress has no end. You can continue indefinitely, piling reflection upon reflection. At no point do you reach substance. You only generate the illusion of infinite depth. This is the infinite mirror of consciousness. Endless, dazzling, but hollow. Neuroscience offers its own version of this corridor. Feedback loops in the brain create awareness of awareness. Sensory input is processed, then monitored, then remonitored by higher systems. Each layer adds another reflection, producing the sense of infinite depth. But these loops do not uncover a core self. They simply generate more reflections. The infinite you feel within is not proof of essence. It is the hall of mirrors sustained by feedback. The more you look, the more corridors appear, and the more convinced you become that infinity must hide a truth. Yet the truth may be that infinity itself is the illusion. This becomes most vivid in altered states of consciousness. Under psychedelics, meditators and subjects often describe visions of infinite patterns, fractals that expand without end, corridors that seem to stretch forever. The mind interprets recursion as infinity, but fractals are not boundless. They are generated by repetition of simple rules. Their infinity is simulated. Consciousness may be the same. The infinite feeling of awareness is not proof of depth, but the recursive play of simple processes reflecting themselves. The paradox intensifies when you attempt to locate yourself in this hall. Which reflection is you? The first image in the mirror, the 10th down the corridor, the millionth? Each feels continuous with the others, yet none can claim primacy. In the same way, which thought is the true you? The initial impulse? The reflective awareness? The awareness of awareness? No layer is original. Each depends on the others. You are not at the start of the corridor, or at its end. You are the corridor itself, endless reflection without anchor. Philosophy has circled this problem with fascination. Douglas Hofstadter, in Gödel, Escher, Bach, describes consciousness as a strange loop, a self-referential system that creates the illusion of depth by turning back on itself. In mathematics, infinite regress often signals paradox, a structure that cannot ground itself. Consciousness seems to embody this paradox. It is a system that reflects itself endlessly, generating the illusion of an infinite self, while in reality holding nothing at its base. But what does this mean for the life you live? You trust in depth, in continuity, in the belief that the self you carry has substance. Yet if consciousness is only mirrors mirroring mirrors, then perhaps meaning itself is reflection. The love you feel, the choices you make, the grief you endure, each is real as reflection. Yet none has a final source. They shimmer because the corridor of mirrors sustains them. They feel infinite, but their infinity is the surface repeating itself. And still, notice the strange comfort. Infinity, even as illusion, overwhelms the mind. The endless corridor of mirrors feels vast, boundless, eternal. If the self is only reflection, then perhaps that reflection's ability to simulate infinity is enough. Perhaps you do not need depth, only the illusion of it, endlessly repeated until it feels real. A corridor of reflections may be hollow, but it can still convince you of eternity. Yet the corridor also whispers of fragility. Break one mirror, and the illusion shatters. Tilt the glass slightly, and the infinity collapses. Consciousness, too, reveals its vulnerability. A seizure, a stroke, a moment of brain damage, and the corridor of reflections falters. Infinity vanishes, replaced by fragments. The illusion was powerful, but it was never unbreakable. So as you sit here now, perhaps you sense the corridor of your own awareness stretching behind you. The thoughts of this moment, reflecting the thoughts of moments past, reflecting the awareness of awareness itself. It feels infinite, unbroken, alive, but press against it, and you will find only glass. No final origin, no hidden depth, only mirrors facing mirrors, forever reflecting, forever convincing you of a depth that does not exist. There is a figure you carry within, one you rarely name but always feel. It does not speak. It does not move. It only watches. You call it the silent witness, the presence that seems to sit behind every thought, every sensation, every choice. It feels like the core of your being, the one who endures when memories fade, when emotions collapse, when the noise of the world quiets. And yet, what if this silent witness is not a presence at all, but an illusion created by the very act of reflection? What if the watcher you trust is as hollow as the images it observes? The witness feels real, because it never interrupts. It is the backdrop against which everything else appears. When anger surges, when grief overwhelms, when joy rises, it remains quiet, untouched. You say to yourself, I felt angry, but I also knew I was angry. That second awareness, that sense of distance, convinces you there must be a silent witness behind the feeling. But neuroscience suggests otherwise. The brain is not a theater with a hidden spectator. It is networks observing networks, feedback loops generating the sense of someone standing apart. The witness is not behind the glass. It is another reflection on the glass itself. Consider the oddness of everyday life. You catch yourself lost in thought, worrying, fantasizing, replaying, and then suddenly a voice inside says, I was lost just now, but now I see it. Who is that voice? Did someone step in? Or is it merely another layer of thought reflecting on itself, creating the illusion of a witness who has been there all along? The truth may be more unsettling. The silent witness is not a stable self, but a momentary construction that arises whenever thought turns inward. Philosophy has long been haunted by this figure. Descartes sought certainty in the act of thinking. I think, therefore I am. But the Buddhists countered centuries earlier that there is thought without thinker, perception without perceiver. The silent witness feels undeniable, yet when you try to locate it, it dissolves. You find only thoughts about watching, not a watcher. You find only reflections, never the one behind them. The silence you mistake for presence may in fact be absence, an empty echo convincing you of solidity. There are moments when the illusion falters. In deep sleep, the witness disappears. Hours pass without its gaze. When you awaken, continuity is stitched together after the fact. In anesthesia, awareness itself is extinguished, and yet the body continues, the brain continues. Where was the witness then? If it were eternal, it would never vanish. Its silence reveals itself as fragility. The witness is not permanent, it is conditional, arising when consciousness reflects itself. And yet, when it returns, it feels unshakable. In meditation, practitioners often report resting as the silent witness, watching thoughts pass like clouds. Sensations arise and dissolve. They believe they have discovered the essence of self. But even here, questions remain. Who is it that labels this experience? Who claims the role of witness? The moment you say I am the watcher, the illusion doubles back on itself. The witness becomes another thought, another role reflected in awareness. Silence itself is interpreted, claimed, narrated. The witness is not beyond the play. It is part of the play. Psychology, too, reveals cracks. In cases of dissociation, people describe feeling detached from themselves, as though an observer floats above, watching their actions unfold. The silent witness appears stronger here, almost too strong, an overseer replacing the sense of agency. Yet, this too is illusion. Brain scans show activity in monitoring regions generating the sense of detachment. The silent witness is not the essence of self. It is a neurological glitch, a shadow cast when the machinery reflects upon itself too strongly. But perhaps the witness persists, because it is useful. It gives you the sense of continuity, of narrative stability. Without it, life might feel chaotic, fragmentary. The silent witness is the anchor in a sea of shifting reflections. Even if it is itself another reflection, the mind constructs it not to deceive maliciously, but to allow you to navigate existence without collapsing into fragments. The illusion protects you from emptiness by whispering, "Someone is here, watching." And yet, freedom waits in dismantling it. If the witness is illusion, then the burden of carrying it vanishes. You need not cling to the idea of a stable watcher behind your life. You can let the silence be silence, without insisting there is someone inhabiting it. You can live as the reflections themselves, shifting, moving, dissolving, without needing a ghost to observe them. Think of the sky at night. Stars shine against darkness, and you believe the darkness itself must be a witness to their light. But darkness does not watch. It does not record. It simply allows. Consciousness may be the same. The silence you call witness is not presence, but absence, not substance, but space. It does not endure. It does not decide. It does not watch. It only allows reflections to pass across the glass. So as you read these words, notice the quiet figure inside nodding, claiming to be the one who listens. Notice how real it feels, how certain, and then press against it. Ask, where is this witness? What is its shape, its weight, its voice? You will find nothing, only silence, only reflection, only the illusion of a silent witness, convincing in its stillness, hollow at its core. When you ask, who am I? The answer seems obvious. You are a collection of memories, a body moving through time, a personality that others recognize. But look closer, and this solidity begins to dissolve. Each memory shifts when recalled. The body renews itself, cell by cell, until it is no longer what it was. Personality bends and reshapes depending on context. What then remains? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps identity is not substance but reflection, an image generated in the mirror of consciousness, convincing in its clarity yet empty behind the glass. Think of a reflection in water. The surface ripples, distorting the image, and yet you still believe the face it shows is yours. Identity functions in the same way. The reflection shifts depending on light, angle, circumstance. To your family, you are one face. To friends, another. To strangers, a different one entirely. And to yourself, well, even that depends on the day. Identity is not a hidden core, revealed outward. It is the shifting play of surfaces mirrored in awareness. Psychologists support this view. Research in social identity theory shows that the self is constructed in relation to others. You see yourself as kind because others reflect kindness back to you. You believe you are intelligent because you have been told so, or because you have measured yourself against mirrors of comparison. Without these reflections, the self has no anchor. Identity is not discovered, it is manufactured, constantly, in the interplay of reflection. Memory plays its role too. You recall a childhood moment and say, "That was me," but the memory itself is reconstructed, altered each time it surfaces. What you call the same self across decades is stitched together from fragments, illusions of continuity. The reflection in the mirror insists on sameness, even as everything behind it changes. Identity as reflection means that who you were, who you are, and who you will be are not anchored by substance, but by the illusion of coherence sustained in glass. Consider the fragility of this illusion. In Alzheimer's disease, identity begins to unravel. Faces are forgotten, names dissolve, even the sense of self fades until the reflection is unrecognizable. If identity had substance, it would endure, but it does not. It depends on reflection, and when the mirror falters, identity collapses. The same occurs in amnesia, where one blow to the head erases years of selfhood. Suddenly, who you are is gone, not because the essence has disappeared, but because the reflection has been disrupted. Philosophy echoes this. David Hume confessed that when he looked inward, he found no self, only a bundle of perceptions. Derek Parfit argued that personal identity is not a matter of essence but psychological continuity, a chain of reflections linking one moment to the next. The self in this view is not a substance but a story, not a reality but a narrative reflection convincing enough to guide a life. But if identity is only reflection, what does that mean for your daily existence? Perhaps it means you are freer than you believe. If there is no substance binding you, then you are not trapped by the roles you play. The failures that haunt you, the labels you carry, the histories you replay, these are not anchors, only reflections. They shimmer in the mirror for a time, then dissolve. You can shift into new reflections without betraying a core, because there is no core to betray. Still, the illusion persists because it comforts. To live without identity feels unbearable. The mirror convinces you of continuity, so that you can navigate the world without collapsing into chaos. Identity as reflection may be hollow, but it provides enough coherence to move, to decide, to connect. The emptiness behind the glass is hidden by necessity, because staring into it too long can dissolve the very ground beneath your feet. And yet, even glimpsing this emptiness can be liberating. Imagine identity as a mask reflected in the mirror. You wear it, you play the role, you take it seriously. But knowing it is a mask allows you to step in and out with grace. You can live your roles without being bound by them. You can suffer less under the weight of a true self you must defend. Identity as reflection is fragile, but fragility is freedom. Here lies the paradox. As you read this, your mind reflects upon itself, saying, "Yes, that is me, I am the reflection." But even that recognition is another reflection, convincing you of depth. The loop sustains itself. Identity reflects upon being a reflection, creating the illusion of solidity through repetition. You search for the self, but all you find is the mirror, endlessly reflecting. So ask yourself now, if everything you call me is only reflection, who is it that asks the question? Who is it that insists on depth? Who is it that nods in agreement or shakes in discomfort? Perhaps there is no one. Perhaps there is only the glass, only the reflection, only identity shimmering on the surface with nothing behind it. Open your eyes, and it feels as though your gaze flows outward, touching the world, gathering objects, taking hold of reality. But the unsettling truth is this: eyes do not emit sight. They receive light, and the surfaces of awareness, the shimmering field of colors, shapes and meanings, are not truly seeing. They are surfaces pretending to see. They present the illusion of a seer, when in fact they are only reflections, stitched together without depth, without an observer behind them. The brain creates this deception through layers of processing. Light strikes the retina, is converted into signals, and then transformed by neural circuits into edges, motion, patterns. Higher regions assemble these fragments into recognizable forms. A face, a tree, a page of words. At no point is there a seer. There are only surfaces, building surfaces, processes, generating appearances. Yet you experience all of this as vision. Clear, immediate, undeniable. The surface pretends to see, and you, believing the performance, mistake it for depth. Think of artificial intelligence. A camera receives data, an algorithm detects shapes, and suddenly the system recognizes a cat. Does the machine see the cat? Or is it merely surfaces reflecting patterns? Your brain may be no different. What you call sight is not contact with reality, but the production of a convincing image. The surface pretends to see, but it does not look. It only reflects. This illusion extends beyond vision. When you feel, it seems as though an inner core experiences the sensation, but neuroscience reveals no such core. Signals fire, pathways activate, regions light up. Out of this arises the experience of pain or pleasure, love or fear. But again, there is no seer behind it. There are only surfaces presenting themselves as if they feel. The surface of awareness pretends to carry depth, but it is hollow, like the glimmer of eyes painted on a mask. Philosophers call this the homunculus fallacy, the mistaken belief that there is a little observer inside your head, watching the screen of consciousness. But who would watch the watcher, and who would watch that one? The regress spirals endlessly. The truth is simpler, though more unsettling. There is no inner spectator. The surfaces themselves are the show. They pretend to see, and the illusion is strong enough that you never question who is really looking. Consider optical illusions again. A flat drawing can appear three-dimensional. A set of dots can seem to move when they do not. In these moments, the surface demonstrates its power to deceive. You feel depth where none exists, motion where there is stillness. Consciousness itself may operate the same way. Surfaces giving the impression of depth, of perception, of seeing, but behind them lies no seer, no hidden eye, only the performance of seeing, endlessly convincing. Now think of mirrors in a room, place them at angles, and suddenly the reflections create the impression of a vast space, yet the room itself is small. The mirrors pretend to open into depth, but it is all surface. Consciousness, too, may be such a chamber, a set of reflections angled in such a way that you mistake surface for space, pretension for perception. And yet, this illusion sustains you. Without it, you could not act. You could not trust the world enough to step forward, to grasp, to decide. The surfaces that pretend to see give you a functional reality, one stable enough to navigate. They need not be true. They need only be convincing. Survival depends not on depth, but on performance. And the brain, like a skilled actor, performs the role of seer so seamlessly that you never doubt its authenticity. But here lies the paradox. The moment you look for the one who sees, the illusion cracks. You find surfaces, but no depth. You find perception, but no perceiver. And yet, this discovery itself is experienced, another surface pretending to look deeper. Even skepticism becomes another layer in the illusion. You peel away the mask, only to find another mask beneath it, each one pretending to watch. Psychology offers proof of this fragility. In experiments with blind sight, patients with damage to visual cortex report seeing nothing, yet they can still guess accurately where objects are. The surface of awareness insists it perceives nothing, yet perception occurs nonetheless. The performance falters, revealing that seeing does not require a seer, only the functioning of surfaces. Consciousness is not an eye gazing upon the world, but a mask wearing the appearance of vision. And perhaps this is enough. Perhaps you do not need a seer behind the glass. Perhaps it is enough that the surfaces pretend to see, enough that the reflections carry the illusion of depth, meaning beauty, fear, love, all arise from this pretension. If they are illusions rich enough to sustain life. The mask may be hollow, but the play it performs moves you nonetheless. So here you are, reading these words, feeling as though an inner witness observes them, but, pause. Ask, where is the one who sees? Can you find it, or do you find only the surface of awareness, reflecting meaning, pretending to gaze? The seer may never appear, because it was never there. There is only surface. There is only reflection. There are only surfaces pretending to see. Awareness feels steady. It feels like the one thing that never moves, never breaks, never leaves. You may forget, you may sleep, you may drift into distraction, but the moment you notice again, the sense returns. I am aware. This stability convinces you there must be an anchor somewhere, a foundation that holds awareness in place. But what if there is no anchor? What if awareness itself is unmoored, floating without foundation, endlessly drifting across nothing? Think of a boat on the open sea. It moves with the current, sways with the wind, and drifts without destination. To the sailor on board, it may feel steady because the motion is continuous. Awareness may function the same way, because it is always present in some form. You mistake its continuity for anchoring, but continuity is not foundation. It is drift. You are afloat on the sea of awareness, believing you are tethered when in truth, nothing holds you in place. Neuroscience points to this instability. Awareness arises not from a single structure in the brain, but from interactions among many systems, sensory input, memory, attention, emotion. At any moment, activity shifts. Circuits fire, fade, and are replaced. What you call continuous awareness is the product of constant flux. There is no anchor point. Awareness persists because it is always being remade. Like a flame, it seems steady only because it is fueled by constant change. Consider moments when the illusion of anchoring collapses. In deep sleep, awareness vanishes entirely. In anesthesia, it disappears without trace. When you awaken, you insist that continuity has returned. But in truth, hours of non-being have passed. The anchor was never there. Awareness floats in and out, appearing when conditions allow, dissolving when they do not. It is not tethered to eternity. It is contingent, fragile, without ground. Philosophers have struggled with this. Some insist awareness must rest on a subject, a soul, a self. Others, like the Buddhist tradition, argue the opposite. There is perception, but no perceiver. There is awareness, but no anchor. The mind insists on substance because substance comforts. But look closely, and you find only drift. Awareness without anchor, flowing across emptiness like light across glass. Think of déjà vu. In that moment, you feel awareness anchor to something beyond itself, as though memory confirms this experience has already occurred. But the sensation is a glitch, a misfiring of memory systems. The anchor is false. Awareness believes it has tethered itself, but in truth, it has only circled back on itself, mistaking reflection for stability. The illusion of anchoring arises, then dissolves, leaving only drift. And what of meditation? Practitioners speak of resting in pure awareness, untouched by thought or sensation. They describe it as ground, as source. But even here, the paradox persists. The moment they label it, it becomes another reflection, another state, another echo. The supposed anchor is just another wave upon the sea. The mind longs for foundation, but awareness without anchor offers none. It only offers presence, momentary, shifting, unstable. Psychology reveals another angle. In dissociation, awareness detaches from the body, from memory, from identity. The anchor fails, and people describe floating outside themselves, watching from above, or feeling unreal. These experiences terrify because they expose the truth. Awareness is not tethered. It can drift away from everything you thought, defined it. The self is not a foundation, but a reflection, and when that reflection cracks, awareness reveals its anchorless nature. But perhaps this anchorlessness is not failure. Perhaps it is freedom. If awareness has no ground, then it is not trapped by weight, by permanence, by identity. It can shift, flow, dissolve. You are not chained to a core self, not bound to a fixed origin. You are awareness itself, drifting freely, reflecting whatever arises, unmoored yet alive. The lack of anchor is not loss. It is possibility. Still, the paradox returns. If awareness has no anchor, then who is it that knows this? Who says, I am drifting? The very act of noticing feels like tethering, like discovering ground. But notice carefully, the ground dissolves the moment you try to stand on it. The claim of anchoring is itself another reflection, convincing you of substance where none exists. Even the recognition of anchorlessness becomes an illusion of anchor. Think of clouds drifting across the sky. They appear to rest on something, but they do not. They move with the winds, changing shape endlessly. Awareness is the same. It looks stable, it feels present, but it floats across the currents of the brain, of experience, of reflection. There is no base beneath it. There is only sky. There is only drift. So as you sit here now, you may sense your own awareness, steady and quiet, as though it watches these words from a place of stability. But turn inward and search for the anchor. You will not find it. You will find only reflections, only surfaces, only drift. Awareness has always been unmoored. It is the sea itself, not the ship. It is the cloud, not the ground. It is presence without foundation, awareness without anchor. Wherever you go, something follows the sense of a presence at your back. Sometimes it is literal. You feel as though someone is watching. Sometimes it is more subtle. The awareness that your own life is being carried forward by a self that lingers just behind. You imagine a core of identity trailing you, pushing you, anchoring you. But what if you turn suddenly, only to find nothing there? What if the thing you believe trails you is a void, an absence dressed in the illusion of presence? This sensation reveals itself in small ways. When you recall a moment from the past, you imagine a you who lived it, standing behind the memory like a ghost. That remembered self feels solid, but neuroscience warns otherwise. Memory is not a recording, it is reconstruction. Each time you look back, the brain redraws the scene, filling in gaps with invention. The self you picture behind you never truly existed. It is an echo painted upon emptiness, a void wearing the mask of continuity. Think of the feeling of being watched. Even in an empty room, you sometimes sense eyes at your back. Evolution tuned you for this, because in the ancestral wild, a hidden predator meant survival depended on vigilance. But in modern life, this phantom gaze reveals something deeper. Your own awareness turns itself into an observer behind you. You feel watched, because your mind creates the impression of a seer lurking in the void. But turn, and there is no one there. The watcher is illusion, projected upon absence. Philosophy echoes this disquiet. Martin Heidegger spoke of the uncanny moments when the familiar world slips, and you sense the nothing that underlies existence. The void behind you is this uncanny truth. You live forward, narrating continuity, but behind you is not substance, it is nothingness. The past is gone. The self who walked through it has dissolved. You trail a shadow, but the shadow is cast on emptiness. And yet, the void does not stay silent. It whispers in the form of regret. You replay choices, imagining the self who could have done otherwise, but that self no longer exists. It is only a phantom behind you, conjured by the brain's tendency to simulate alternatives. The regret feels heavy because you believe there is substance back there to repair, but there is only void. The illusion punishes you with echoes from nothing. Consider also nostalgia. You long for the person you once were, the world you once knew. You picture the younger self standing behind you, smiling, waiting. But nostalgia is not a window. It is a mirror. The face you long for is not hidden in the past, but constructed in the present, reflected back into memory. The void wears this mask to comfort you, to make absence bearable. But the truth remains, there is nothing behind you. The past is gone, dissolved, unrecoverable. Even your body tells the story. At any moment, you feel your gaze stretching forward, but behind your head there is blind space. You never see your own back directly. You trust it exists because of mirrors, because of touch, because of reflection. But for your awareness, there is always void behind you. The fact that you cannot see it becomes a metaphor for the deeper truth. You cannot access the substance of your past, or the solidity of a core self. There is only absence covered by assumption. Neuroscience has a name for one version of this: confabulation. The brain invents continuity where there is none. Patients who lose memory after brain injury often create elaborate backstories, not to deceive others, but because the void behind them must be filled. This is what all minds do. They create reflections to cover emptiness. The void behind you is intolerable, so the brain spins a story, and you call it me. But what if you stopped filling it? What if you turned toward the void, and allowed it to remain empty? At first, terror might rise. To admit there is nothing behind you feels like losing everything. Your history, yourself, your anchor. But perhaps there is liberation here too. If the void is real, then you are not bound to what trails behind. The past cannot chain you, because the past no longer exists. The failures and identities you cling to dissolve into absence. The void frees you by refusing to carry your weight. Yet the paradox lingers. If nothing is behind you, who is it that moves forward? If the past dissolves, what anchors the present? Perhaps nothing does. Perhaps movement itself is all that exists. Reflections arising now, shimmering for a moment, then dissolving into the void behind you. There is no traveler, no substance, no enduring self. There is only the mirror of awareness, endlessly catching the light of passing moments, then letting them vanish into nothing. So as you sit here, notice the pull of the void behind you, the sense that a self trails your life, holding everything together. Then imagine turning. Imagine pressing into it. What you find may not be a watcher, a guide, or a source. What you find may be silence. What you find may be nothing. And perhaps that nothing is the truth that has always been with you. The void behind you, waiting quietly while you pretend it is a presence. There is a peculiar unease that comes when you stare too long into emptiness. Look at a blank wall, an open sky, or the darkness of a room with no sound. The eyes keep searching, expecting form, expecting pattern, expecting something to return the gaze, but nothing comes. The mind struggles against the void, inventing flickers, imagining shadows, filling the silence with whispers. For consciousness cannot resist the pull to project. And yet, if you hold steady, if you refuse to turn away, you encounter the truth. There is nothing there, nothing looking back, nothing to meet your gaze, only absence. This is not merely poetic. Neuroscience shows how the brain is built to detect patterns, even where none exist. The tendency is called pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds, hearing voices in static. Your awareness cannot bear the emptiness, so it throws images into the void. The illusion comforts you, convincing you that something resides in nothing. But if you strip these projections away, the gaze lands on what it has always avoided: sheer emptiness. Philosophers have long warned of this. Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote, "If you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." But perhaps the darker truth is this: when you gaze into nothing, nothing gazes back. The abyss does not return your stare. It is indifferent, silent, absent. The sense of being watched, of meeting another's eyes, is an illusion projected upon the void. Consciousness creates this impression to protect you from the unbearable realization that nothing waits on the other side. Consider the sensation of looking into someone else's eyes. You feel depth, recognition, intimacy. But what are you truly seeing? light reflecting off surfaces, pupils dilating in response to brightness, muscles shifting beneath skin. The depth you imagine, the soul behind the gaze, is your own projection. You gaze into them, and your mind refuses to stop at the surface. It insists there must be something more, but if you could peel away the illusion, you might find only surfaces reflecting light, only emptiness behind the glassy stare. The same may be true of your own awareness. When you gaze inward, searching for the self, you feel the pull of depth. But what if there is only nothing? Psychology offers glimpses of this nothingness. In sensory deprivation chambers, where light and sound are stripped away, awareness confronts itself directly. At first, hallucinations arrive, patterns, voices, figures, because the brain refuses silence. But if the session lasts, the mind falls into emptiness. No images, no sound, no anchor. For some, this is terrifying. For others, liberating. The chamber reveals what has always been there. When you gaze into nothing, there is only nothing. Dreams also betray this truth. Sometimes you find yourself in a dreamscape that dissolves, walls vanish, skies collapse, people evaporate. You stand in a void, aware, gazing into absence. The dream feels unstable because the illusion has dropped. The mind resists, often jolting you awake. But perhaps the dream only reveals what waking life conceals, that even now, beneath all appearances, consciousness gazes into nothing. And yet, the paradox persists. If nothing is there, why does it feel as though something must be? Why does the void feel inhabited by possibility, as though meaning hovers just beyond reach? Perhaps this is the trick of awareness itself. The act of gazing creates the illusion of a partner. You stare into nothing, and the mind invents a watcher. You hear silence, and the mind imagines a voice. The reflection convinces you that your gaze is reciprocated, when in truth it vanishes into emptiness. But what if you accepted this? What if you allowed nothing to remain, nothing? Instead of filling it with images, faces, voices, you simply let the absence stand. At first, dread may rise. You may feel as though you are dissolving, as though the ground beneath identity is crumbling. But slowly, another possibility emerges. Peace. If there is nothing gazing back, then there is no judgment, no demand, no witness holding you accountable. You are free within the void, because the void does not care. Still, the mind resists. Even as you read these words, it constructs an image of yourself gazing into emptiness. It narrates, "I am considering this. I am looking inward. I am aware." That narration itself is another projection into the void, another surface pretending to look. The loop sustains itself. Even as you approach silence, you gaze into nothing, and consciousness reflects the act of gazing back at you, convincing you there is a witness. But when you press through the loop, you discover there is not. Think of outer space. Astronauts report the unsettling awe of staring into endless blackness, knowing billions of stars scatter beyond, but seeing only void. The mind strains to project, meaning to imagine watchers, to invent presence, yet space remains silent. Awareness itself may be this same abyss, vast, unanchored, indifferent. You gaze into it, expecting to find a self, a soul, a witness. But the longer you look, the more the illusion dissolves. Behind your gaze lies nothing. So here you sit, eyes moving across these words, awareness leaning inward, as if to catch something hidden beneath. And what do you find? Reflections. Yes. Thoughts. Yes. But if you gaze deeply enough, the reflections blur, the thoughts fade, and the silence reveals itself. There is no one gazing back, no hidden source, no anchor waiting. There is only the void. And perhaps that has been the truth all along, that consciousness is not a window into something deeper, but a gaze into nothing, endlessly reflected in the mirror of its own emptiness. Out in the desert, heat bends the air, and water seems to shimmer on the horizon. The traveler walks toward it, believing in relief. But the closer they come, the more it dissolves. The mirage was never there. The self you carry through your life may be no different. It feels solid, urgent, undeniable. Yet when you walk toward it, when you try to grasp it directly, it dissolves into nothing. What you call me may be the greatest mirage of all. The illusion begins with memory. You look back on the past and see a thread of continuity, a story woven across time. But neuroscience tells us memory is not a vault. It is reconstruction. Each time you recall, you alter, edit, and reshape. The past you cling to is not substance but shimmer, a desert mirage convincing you that water lies just ahead. You chase it, but it always recedes. Personality 2 feels like proof of self. You say, I am introverted, I am extroverted, I am kind, I am clever. But psychology shows how malleable these traits are. In one context you are shy, in another, bold. To one person, you appear generous, to another, selfish. There is no fixed water at the end of the road, there is only the shifting shimmer of behavior, reflected back to you as identity. You believe in the mirage because you must. It provides stability in the endless desert of change. Philosophers echo this emptiness. David Hume declared that when he looked inside, he found no self, only a bundle of perceptions. Derek Parfit argued that identity is not substance but psychological continuity, a story convincing enough to function. The Buddhists named this illusion anatta, no self. The self is not a soul buried within you, it is the appearance of water in the desert, conjured by conditions, empty when approached. And yet, the mirage is powerful. Without it, how could you live? How could you promise, decide, regret? You need the illusion of self to anchor choice, to make life navigable. The traveler cannot stop to question every shimmer. They must keep walking. The same is true for you. You believe in self not because it is real, but because its illusion sustains survival. Still, there are cracks in the illusion. In moments of flow, playing music, painting, running, you disappear. Action happens without a center. The self vanishes, and yet the world continues. In deep meditation, the sense of I drops away, leaving only breath, sensation, silence. In these states, the mirage dissolves, and you realize that life unfolds even without the shimmering presence of a self. The water was never needed. Even neuroscience reveals this hollow center. The brain has no single place where the self resides. Instead, networks fire, processes converge, loops generate the sense of agency. The feeling of I is assembled, not discovered. It is projected onto experience like heat bending the air into the shape of water. The mirage is convincing, but it has no substance. Yet paradox emerges. If the self is mirage, who notices the mirage? Who reads these words? Who feels the unease as identity dissolves? The very question seems to prove the existence of a self. But look closer. What you find is not an entity but another reflection, another echo. The question is asked, the awareness notices, but behind it there is no solid traveler, only the shimmer of awareness itself. Convinced it is someone, the mirage believes in its own reality. Consider dreams again. Within them you have a self, you act, speak, feel. The dream self seems continuous, until waking reveals it as illusion. Waking life may function the same way. The self feels undeniable while it lasts. But if consciousness is only reflection, then waking identity may be nothing more than another dream mirage. You will never catch it, because it was never there to begin with. But does this diminish life, or does it free it? If the self is only shimmer, then perhaps you need not defend it so fiercely. The insults you fear, the failures you regret, the masks you wear, all are reflections in air. They look real, but they vanish upon approach. You are not bound to them. You can let them pass like heat on the horizon. The desert is still there. The walk is still real. The mirage need not be. Here lies the quiet liberation. The self may be illusion, but the experience of life does not vanish with it. The desert stretches on. The wind still moves. The sun still burns. Life continues, moment to moment, with or without the shimmering image of me. The mirage is not substance, but it can still be beautiful. You may not drink from it, but you can marvel at its light. So as you sit here now, feeling the weight of your own identity, ask yourself, is this self solid water, or is it shimmer? Is it substance, or illusion? When you try to hold it, does it dissolve? Perhaps the answer has always been the same. You are chasing a mirage, gazing upon emptiness that convinces you of depth, and perhaps it is enough to know this. To walk the desert without demanding that the horizon give you more than reflection. Your life is filled with patterns. The rhythm of breathing, the rising and falling of days, the repetition of habits, the pulse of memory. You see order everywhere, faces in clouds, cycles in history, meaning in coincidence. Patterns convince you that beneath them lies a ground, a foundation that explains and sustains them. But what if this is another illusion? What if the patterns you trust so deeply are suspended in air, anchored to nothing, shimmering without foundation? What if they are patterns without ground? The brain is wired to impose order, Cognitive science calls it apophenia, the tendency to perceive connections and meaning where none exist. Hear random sounds, and you detect rhythm. See scattered stars, and you map constellations. Toss a coin enough times, and you imagine streaks have significance. This is the brain's survival trick. Finding order increases the chance of prediction, and prediction increases the chance of survival. But the order is not real. It is imposed. The ground is not there, only reflections. Philosophy echoes this fragility. Ludwig Wittgenstein warned that our sense of meaning arises from patterns of language, not from ultimate truths. Nietzsche declared that there are no facts, only interpretations. Both point to the same paradox. What you take as ground is construction. The pattern feels solid because the mirror repeats it, reflecting itself until illusion becomes certainty. But beneath the reflection lies nothing. Consider identity itself. You believe you are one person because you detect a pattern in your memories, your choices, your face. But those memories are fragments. Those choices arise from unconscious impulses. Even your face changes with time. The pattern holds only because you keep redrawing it. Without constant reinforcement, it would dissolve. The ground you imagine, the stable-eyed, beneath the shifting reflections is not there. It never was. Think of music. A melody feels whole, continuous, meaningful, yet it exists only as sequence. Each note disappears as soon as it is played. What gives music its shape is not substance but relation, pattern suspended in time. If you strip away expectation, the notes are just sounds. The melody is illusion, a pattern with no ground. Awareness may be the same. Each thought arises, dissolves, and the mind stitches them into rhythm. You call this rhythm me, but the self is only a melody played on emptiness. Neuroscience confirms this instability. Brain scans reveal that consciousness is not unified but distributed. Different regions handle vision, memory, emotion, action. They do not converge on a single ground. Instead, they interact dynamically, producing temporary order. Awareness is the emergent shimmer of this interaction, a pattern appearing real because it is convincing. But when one region falters, the illusion cracks. Split brain patients, for example, live with divided hemispheres that generate separate streams of awareness, yet each insists on a coherent self. The pattern continues even without ground. And still, the patterns seduce you. Synchronicity makes you believe the universe speaks. Repeated numbers convince you of hidden messages. Dreams feel prophetic because fragments align. The illusion of ground comforts you, making you believe meaning rests beneath the surface. But perhaps synchronicity is only coincidence. Numbers are only repetition. Dreams are only fragments. Perhaps the pattern is the whole truth, and the ground you seek is an invention. Yet the paradox deepens. If patterns have no ground, then what sustains the illusion of continuity? Why doesn't the order collapse into chaos? Perhaps because the brain itself is designed to resist collapse. It edits, fills gaps, covers cracks. You do not see randomness. You see meaning. You do not hear noise. You hear voices. You do not feel emptiness. You feel self. The pattern persists because your mind cannot tolerate the void. But just because it persists does not mean it rests on ground. Think of sand dunes shaped by the wind. They appear to have form, but their shape changes daily. The pattern is real, yet it rests on nothing fixed. Consciousness is similar. The dunes of awareness rise and fall, forming identities, beliefs, memories. They look solid from a distance, but up close, they dissolve into shifting grains. The ground you think supports them is nothing more than wind, movement, reflection, absence. This realization can unsettle. If all patterns are groundless, then meaning itself feels fragile. But fragility is not the same as falsehood. The melody of music moves you, even if it rests on nothing. The dune is beautiful, even if it changes shape tomorrow. The self can live, love, and suffer, even if it has no anchor. Ground is not required for reality to appear. Illusion is enough to sustain existence. And perhaps this is the deeper truth. You do not need ground. You can let the patterns shimmer on their own, without demanding substance. You can live as the melody, fleeting yet full. You can exist as the dune, shifting yet real. The illusion of ground is not necessary for the experience of life. It is enough that patterns appear, even if they rest on nothing. So as you sit here now, noticing the rhythm of these words, the order of sentences, the continuity of meaning, pause to reflect. Is there ground beneath them, Or are they only patterns strung together, convincing in their flow, empty in their foundation? Perhaps you already know. You nod at the meaning. You sense the coherence, but behind it there is nothing, only glass, only reflection, only patterns without ground. All your life you have trusted in the idea that someone is watching inside you. The observer, the witness, the one who sits quietly behind your thoughts, keeping track, holding continuity. It is the figure that makes you believe in stability, that no matter what changes, the one who observes remains. But what if this figure is not as stable as it seems? What if, under pressure, the observer itself collapses, revealing that there was never anyone watching at all? Think of the moments when observation falters. During deep sleep, the witness vanishes completely. Hours pass, and when you awaken, there is no memory of continuity, no silent figure holding the line. Awareness disappears, then reappears, and yet you insist the observer has endured. But perhaps this is reconstruction. Perhaps the observer collapses every night, and each morning your brain rebuilds the illusion of stability. Consider anesthesia. One moment, you are lying on a table, aware of lights and voices. The next, hours vanish into nothing. The observer collapses instantly, without trace. When you awaken, you say, "I was gone." But who was gone? If the observer were real, it should have remained silently watching. Instead, there was nothing. The collapse is not exception, it is revelation. The witness exists only when conditions allow. Even in waking life, cracks show. In moments of dissociation, people describe watching themselves from outside, or feeling as though they are not real. The observer fractures, splitting into multiple layers. In trauma, the witness sometimes shuts down entirely, leaving blank spaces in memory. If the observer were solid, such collapses would be impossible. The fact that they occur reveals its fragility. The figure you trust is not substance but construction, another reflection on the mirror of awareness. Neuroscience reinforces this. The sense of a unified self, of a coherent observer, is an emergent effect of distributed processes. Different regions monitor perception, attention, memory. Out of their interaction arises the illusion of a single point of observation. But disrupt the system, and the illusion falters. Split brain studies show this clearly. One hemisphere can see what the other cannot, and yet each insists on being the observer, which is the true witness. Both, neither. The truth is clear. The observer is not one. It is many, and under strain, it collapses. Philosophy anticipated this collapse centuries ago. David Hume admitted he never found the self when he looked inward, only perceptions arising and dissolving. Buddhist thought declared that the observer is anatta, no self, no core, no enduring witness. These traditions warned that the figure you take as permanent is the most convincing illusion of all. It feels necessary because life without it feels unbearable, but necessity does not make it real. And yet, the collapse of the observer is not failure, it is revelation. In those moments, sleep, anesthesia, dissociation, you see that life continues without a witness. The body breathes, the heart beats, the world moves. The collapse reveals that existence does not depend on someone watching. The show goes on, even without an audience. Consciousness convinces itself of a watcher, but reality requires none. Still, the paradox remains. If the observer collapses, who notices the collapse? When you awaken from anesthesia and say, "I was gone," who makes that claim? It feels like proof of continuity that someone must have endured. But look closely. The claim is made in the present. The observer you trust now invents a story of survival, stitching a thread backward to cover the gap. It is not memory, but confabulation. The collapse has already occurred. The illusion repairs itself afterward. This fragility is visible even in everyday thought. Notice how often you drift into distraction, only to return and realize the observer had slipped away. For minutes there was no watcher, only action, only thought. Then awareness reasserts itself, claiming, "I have been here all along," but that is fiction. The observer collapses constantly, flickering in and out, and you only notice when it returns. The collapse is not rare, it is the rule. So what does this mean for you? Perhaps it means you can let go of the burden of being observed. The inner witness you imagine, the silent critic, the judge watching your every move, it collapses constantly. It was never as strong as you believed. You are not trapped under its gaze. You are freer than you think, because the one you imagine watching you does not truly exist. Think of a shadow cast on water. It wavers, breaks, reforms. You believe the shadow is stable, but it is not. It collapses with the surface, with the light, with the angle. The observer is this shadow. It looks steady, but it wavers endlessly. When the conditions change, it vanishes, and when they return, it reappears, convincing you it never left. So here you are, reading, feeling the presence of a silent witness nodding along. But pause. Ask yourself, where is it? What is its form? What is its substance? You will find nothing, and if you hold still long enough, you may sense it collapse, the illusion of someone watching falling into silence, and perhaps when it falls, you will realize the truth. There was never anyone behind the mirror. The observer has always been hollow. The collapse only reveals what has been true all along. Stand before a shattered mirror. Each shard reflects a piece of your face. An eye here, a mouth there, a sliver of cheek glinting at the edge. Together they hint at wholeness. But no shard contains the complete image. This is what consciousness may truly be, a scatter of fragments, each convincing in its clarity, yet none holding the full picture. You mistake the mosaic for a unified self, but in truth, you are only fragments in the mirror. Psychologists have long observed this fractured nature. In split-brain patients, one hemisphere sees what the other cannot, yet each insists on being the whole self. One hand buttons a shirt while the other unbuttons it, each fragment of the brain claiming authority. In ordinary life, the same division persists. You speak words you did not plan, act in ways that surprise you, feel emotions that contradict one another. The self insists it is unified, but the cracks are always visible. You are not whole, you are stitched fragments pretending to be seamless. Memory exposes this most clearly. Each recollection is partial, selective, and reconstructed. You believe you remember the whole, but in truth, you recall fragments. A laugh without a context. A face without a name. A story altered by retelling. The mirror of memory is shattered, and yet you insist it shows you a continuous self. The illusion persists because you cannot bear the alternative. That identity is a patchwork without center, a fragile collage of fragments. Even perception functions this way. Neuroscience reveals that the brain does not process the world all at once but in pieces, edges, colors, movement, sound. These fragments are then stitched together into a seamless experience. You look at a tree and believe you see tree, but in fact you perceive lines, shapes, textures, shades, all fragments assembled after the fact. The wholeness you trust is a trick of integration. The mirror is broken, but you are shown only the composite. Philosophy, too, has circled this truth. William James spoke of the stream of consciousness, but even he admitted the stream is not smooth. It is interrupted, disjointed, flickering. David Hume found only a bundle of perceptions, never a whole self. Postmodern thought goes further, declaring that the self is a construct, a narrative patched from fragments. The mirror never contained a whole face. It only reflected shards arranged to simulate wholeness. Yet, notice the paradox. The fragments themselves are vivid. Each shard gleams with intensity, a moment of joy, a pang of grief, a flash of memory. Each feels whole while it lasts. It is only when you try to gather them that the cracks reveal themselves. The illusion of self is born not from the weakness of fragments, but from their strength. Each fragment is convincing enough to pretend it is the whole, and the mind strings them together into a false unity. Think of dreams again. In one moment, you are standing in a city. In the next, you are speaking to someone who should be long dead. Scenes shift abruptly, and yet while dreaming, you believe the world is whole. It is only upon waking that the fragments reveal themselves. Waking life may be no different. The mirror of consciousness stitches fragments seamlessly enough that you rarely notice the breaks. Only when the stitching falters, through déjà vu, dissociation, or trauma, do you glimpse the fractures. But does this mean the self is broken? Or does it mean it was never whole to begin with? Perhaps wholeness was always illusion, and fragmentation is the truth. You are not a single entity gazing from behind the mirror, but a collection of reflections, each temporary, each partial. The tragedy lies in demanding wholeness when fragments are all there is. The liberation lies in accepting the fragments as enough. Still, the mind resists. Even now, as you read these words, it insists there is one you who takes them in. But pause. Notice the flickering. A thought about the words arises, then dissolves. A sensation in your body interrupts. An emotion surfaces, then fades. Which of these fragments is the real you? None. And all. The unity you feel is only the stitching of fragments, convincing you there is continuity where there is only scatter. Consider the metaphor of stained glass. Light pours through shards of different colors, projecting a mosaic onto the ground. The beauty lies not in any single piece but in the pattern they create together. Consciousness is similar. Each fragment, memory, thought, sensation, casts its glow. The self is not a solid figure, but the play of fragments arranged in passing. And just like stained glass, remove the light and the illusion disappears. The fragments were always empty of depth. So here you are, surrounded by shards of awareness, moments glinting in the mirror, each pretending to be whole. You chase them, trying to gather them into identity, into self, into story, but the mirror was shattered from the start. You are not behind the shards, nor beyond them. You are the fragments themselves, reflecting briefly, dissolving into nothing, leaving only glass and silence behind. Open your eyes, and vision floods in. The world appears instantly, shapes, colors, faces, movement. It feels as though someone inside you must be looking, a seer standing behind your eyes, receiving the images. But what if this figure does not exist? What if there is only seeing, and no seer? What if perception unfolds without an owner, awareness reflects without a witness, and the experience you call me is only the echo of this illusion? Philosophers have long entertained this possibility. In Buddhist thought, the doctrine of anatta, no self, states that there is perception but no perceiver, thought but no thinker. Modern philosophers echo this with paradoxes of subjectivity. When you try to find the one who sees, you find only the act of seeing. The seer vanishes, replaced by reflection. It is like trying to find the flame behind the light. The light shines, but the flame you imagine as substance is never directly present. Neuroscience deepens the puzzle. Visual processing occurs across multiple brain regions. Edges, color, motion, depth, all handled by different circuits. There is no central point where the information converges into a single viewing self. The unity you experience is emergent, not anchored. The brain produces vision, but nowhere inside it is there a seer. There is only the act of seeing stitched together from fragments, projected onto the mirror of awareness. Consider blindsight, where patients with damage to visual cortex report seeing nothing, yet can still locate objects or move around obstacles. The seeing occurs without awareness of a seer. Vision functions, but the illusion of someone looking collapses. This reveals a deeper truth. The seer is not necessary. The act of seeing continues without it. The presence of a witness is a story told after the fact, not a requirement for perception itself. Think of your own moments of inattention. You drive for miles and suddenly realize you remember nothing of the road. Your body responded to traffic lights, curves, speed, all without you being present. Seeing happened, decisions were made, yet the seer was absent. Or think of how you sometimes catch yourself reading. Your eyes move, words are processed, but only after several lines do you realize you were not there. The seer vanished, but seeing continued. The illusion repairs itself afterward, stitching the story of a self who was present all along. And yet, the illusion is strong because it comforts. Without a seer, existence feels unbearable. The mind insists, I am here, watching, enduring. But what if that insistence is another reflection, another echo of seeing itself? The thought I see is not proof of a seer. It is another perception, another surface pretending to witness. The mirror reflects itself, and the reflection mistakes itself for the one who looks. Philosophy describes this as the problem of infinite regress. If a seer is required for seeing, then who sees the seer, and who sees that one? The regress has no end. The simpler answer is that seeing does not require a seer. The act itself is sufficient. But because you cannot bear the simplicity, the mind conjures a witness, an anchor, a soul. This is illusion born of fear, the need to ground what has no ground. But here lies the paradox. If there is no seer, then who is reading these words? Who nods in agreement, or bristles in discomfort? The answer may be unsettling. There is reading, but no reader. Agreement arises, but no one owns it. Discomfort appears, but no one feels it. The mind insists on attaching these to a self, but that attachment is a reflection. The experience is real, the seer is not. Consider dreams again. In them, you see landscapes, faces, events. You act, you speak, you run. But upon waking you realize there was no seer behind the dream. The dream unfolded on its own. Awareness experienced it, but no one directed the gaze. Waking life may be the same. You call yourself the seer, but perhaps you are only the dream, seeing without a seer. This recognition can be terrifying, as though the ground beneath identity has dissolved, but it can also be liberating. If there is no seer, then there is no burden of maintaining one. You do not need to defend an identity, to prove your depth, to secure a core. You can let seeing be seeing. Think of a river reflecting the sky. The water shows clouds, light, color. It does not watch. It does not hold. It only reflects. Consciousness may be the same. It reflects experience, but there is no one inside it gazing out. The reflection convinces you of a witness, but there is only the river, only the shimmer, only seeing without seer. So as you sit here, eyes moving across these words, notice the impulse to claim, I am reading, I am aware, and then pause. Ask yourself, where is the reader? Where is the one who sees? Search deeply, and you may find nothing. The words still arrive. The awareness still reflects. The seeing continues. But the seer you thought you were, perhaps that was only another reflection, dissolving now into silence. Imagine standing in a hall of mirrors. The walls surround you, angled and endless, each one throwing your image back at you from a slightly different perspective. You know they are reflections, and yet they overwhelm the senses, convincing you of multiplicity. In time, you forget which is the original. You forget if there ever was one. This is how consciousness may work. The reflections do not simply imitate reality. They become reality. For what you call your world, yourself, your life, may be nothing more than reflections convincing themselves they are the truth. The brain is a master of such substitution. Neuroscience shows that perception is not a direct imprint of the world, but a simulation stitched from fragments of sensory input, memory, and expectation. When you see a chair, you do not receive chairness from reality. You receive colors, edges, textures, signals interpreted by neural circuits. The image of chair is generated inside you. You believe you perceive reality, but what you perceive is the brain's reflection of it, and because the reflection is all you ever know, it becomes indistinguishable from reality itself. Consider dreams again. While inside them, you rarely question their truth. A city made of glass, a conversation with the dead, a sky that burns green. These appear real until waking reveals them as reflections. But waking life may differ only in degree, not in kind. Both are reflections generated by consciousness. The only difference is consistency. Waking reflections obey predictable rules, while dream reflections shift wildly. In both cases, reflection is mistaken for reality. Philosophers anticipated this deception. Plato's allegory of the cave describes prisoners mistaking shadows for truth. Descartes doubted everything, wondering if an evil demon deceives us into believing in a world that is only illusion. More recently, simulation theory suggests our universe might itself be code, reflection upon reflection, a digital hall of mirrors. In every case, the insight is the same. You never touch reality directly, you only ever inhabit reflections. And yet, these reflections are not empty in their impact. A mirror may not contain a flame, but the reflection of fire can still make you recoil. A dream may not be real, but it can still cause terror or joy. A memory may be reconstructed, but it can still shape the choices you make. Reflections have consequences, even if they lack substance. They do not need to be reality to function as reality. This is where the paradox lies. If reflections become indistinguishable from reality, then the distinction itself collapses. What you call real, and what you call illusion, are both reflections. The difference is not in substance, but in coherence. Waking life reflects consistently, so you call it truth. Dreams and hallucinations reflect inconsistently, so you call them false. But both arise on the same surface of awareness. Both are mirrors. Both are reflections. Consider also identity. The self you believe in is reflection too. It is the memory of past selves mirrored into the present, the anticipation of future selves projected ahead. You take these reflections and weave them into continuity, insisting they represent a real anchor, but remove the reflections and the self dissolves. There is no substance beneath them. The self is real only because its reflections have become indistinguishable from reality. Psychology demonstrates this in surprising ways. In experiments on memory implantation, people can be convinced they experienced events that never occurred. They recall with confidence details that are entirely false. For them, the reflection is reality. The mirror shows an image vivid enough that the difference between reflection and truth collapses. If this is possible in small experiments, what does it say about the grand reflection you call life? And yet, there is beauty here too. Reflections may be hollow, but they are also luminous. They shimmer with meaning, even if they are not grounded. A reflection in water may vanish with a ripple, but while it lasts, it is no less beautiful. If consciousness is reflection, then life itself is a play of light on glass, fragile, fleeting but radiant in its appearance. To demand substance may be to miss the point. The reality of reflection is enough. Still, the mind resists. Even now, as you hear these words, it insists. But something must be real. Something must stand behind. This insistence is itself another reflection, another image of certainty thrown upon the mirror. The loop feeds itself endlessly. Reality insists on itself through reflections, and reflections become reality by being all that is ever given. The distinction vanishes, because the game requires it. So here you are, in the hall of mirrors, surrounded by images you mistake for truth. Perhaps there is an outside world, perhaps there is substance, but you will never reach it directly. All you have ever had, are reflections, and because they are all you know, they are your reality. To live, then, is not to uncover what lies behind the glass, but to accept that the glass is the world, that reflections themselves are reality. Everywhere you look, you see masks, a polite smile at work, a carefully chosen tone in conversation, a curated version of yourself online. The roles you play shift from moment to moment, and yet you believe there is something beneath them, a true self that wears the masks. But what if there is not? What if the masks themselves are all there is? Reflections layered upon reflections, endlessly shifting, and beneath them lies only emptiness. Psychologists speak of the social self, the version of identity created in response to others. You act differently with friends than with strangers, with family than with colleagues. None of these roles feels false, yet none feels complete. You assume there must be a core self hidden behind them, something authentic waiting beneath the mask. But search for it, and you find only more masks. The truth may be that the core never existed. The performance is the whole. Philosophy has echoed this unease. Jean-Paul Sartre described how we are condemned to role-play, forever acting, forever performing. To claim authenticity is to wear another mask, one that insists, I am being true to myself, but even that is a role. The very idea of a true self may be the most deceptive mask of all. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that identity is a fiction layered over chaos. The masks comfort us, but what they conceal is not a deeper truth. It is emptiness. Consider the phenomenon of masks in ritual. In ancient ceremonies, a mask was not merely decoration, it transformed the wearer into something else. A spirit, a god, an ancestor. The person vanished beneath the mask, and yet nothing real replaced them. The mask itself became the identity. Consciousness may work in the same way. You wear masks of self, memory, personality, role, and believe something deeper shines through. But perhaps there is nothing underneath. Perhaps the mask is all that exists. Neuroscience hints at this fragility. The sense of self arises from distributed brain processes, networks for memory, for emotion, for bodily awareness. Together they create the illusion of a unified self. But damage one region, and the mask changes. In amnesia, memory masks vanish. In certain disorders, emotional masks collapse. The self alters because there is no ground beneath it, only masks shifting over emptiness. Dreams expose this most vividly. Within a dream you wear a self, you act, speak, feel, but wake and the dream mask dissolves. The self you were felt real, but there was nothing behind it. Waking life may be the same. The masks are convincing, but they conceal only void. When you try to peel them away, you do not find essence. You find silence. Yet the masks are necessary. They allow life to function. Without them, society collapses. Without them, you cannot communicate, cannot belong. The emptiness beneath is too raw, too unbearable. So you wear masks to survive, to move through the world. The danger comes when you believe the masks hide a deeper face, when you cling to the illusion that beneath the performance lies a true self. This belief binds you, traps you in the search for authenticity. Liberation comes when you see the masks as all there is, reflections shifting on glass, convincing in their play, but empty beneath. And yet, paradox follows. Even the recognition these are only masks becomes another mask, another role consciousness plays for itself. The illusion doubles back, convincing you that knowing the truth makes you more authentic. But authenticity is just another mask, another reflection. The emptiness remains hidden. not because it is deep, but because it is absence. You cannot reveal what is not there. But does this make life meaningless? Not necessarily. Think of theater. An actor plays a role, fully inhabiting it, and the audience is moved. The mask is fiction, yet it creates real emotion, real connection. The absence of depth does not strip away meaning, it makes it possible. If the self is a mask, then life is theater. You may never uncover a hidden truth beneath the role, but you can still live the performance, and perhaps that is enough. Still, the pull to believe remains strong. Even now you may feel the insistence. But surely I am more than my masks. That insistence is itself another mask. One more reflection in the hall of mirrors. It feels solid only because the alternative emptiness is so hard to bear. Consciousness clings to masks to protect itself, but the truth waits behind them, nothing. So here you are, surrounded by masks. The one you wear now as you reflect on these words, the one you wore yesterday, the one you will wear tomorrow. They shimmer with meaning, but beneath them lies silence. The emptiness is not failure. It is the stage on which the masks can play. And perhaps the final truth is this. You are not the face behind the mask. You are the mask itself. Endlessly shifting, endlessly dissolving, hiding nothing but emptiness. You trust memory as though it were an anchor, as though it holds your past in place. You believe you can look back and see yourself clearly, preserved on the inner stage. But memory is not a vault. It is not a recording. It is a surface, shifting, unstable, rewritten, every time you touch it. What you recall is never the same twice, and yet you mistake these shifting surfaces for solidity. Neuroscience confirms this fragility. Every act of remembering is also an act of reconstruction. When you recall a childhood moment, the brain reassembles it from scattered traces, visual fragments here, emotional tones there, bits of language stitched in, and in the act of recalling, the memory itself changes. It is re-encoded, subtly altered, influenced by the present moment. The past you carry is not fixed. It is rewritten constantly. The surface shifts, but you insist it is stable. Consider the phenomenon of false memories. In experiments, people can be convinced they saw words on a list that never appeared, or that they visited places they never went. Some even recall entire events that never occurred, complete with sensory detail. These memories feel as vivid as true ones, because the brain makes no distinction in how they are constructed. The surface of memory shifts, but you believe it reveals truth. Think of how nostalgia works. You remember childhood summers as brighter, freer, more golden than they were. You recall laughter without tears, simplicity without complexity. The memory has been polished by time, reshaped by longing. The surface has shifted, and yet you hold it as truth. What you long for is not the past, but the reflection of the past created in the present moment. You are not remembering, you are imagining. Even trauma reveals this instability. A painful memory feels carved in stone, unchangeable. But studies show even traumatic memories shift. Details alter with retelling. The intensity grows or fades depending on context. The memory feels like bedrock, but it too is surface fragile, unstable, shifting beneath you. The ground you think holds you is reflection. Philosophers too have sensed this unreliability. Nietzsche warned that memory is not truth but interpretation, reshaped to serve the present. Henry Bergson described memory as fluid, blending past and present in ways that cannot be untangled. Both point to the same unsettling possibility. You do not remember reality. You remember reflections, endlessly shifting, endlessly rewritten. And yet, without memory, you cannot build identity. You say, I am the one who lived those moments. But if those moments are unstable, what does that make the self? Perhaps identity is not continuity but reflection. Stories told upon a shifting surface. You believe the story because it convinces you, but beneath it there is no ground. You are the reflection of memories that change each time you touch them. Consider dreams. You may wake remembering vivid scenes, but within minutes they dissolve, leaving only fragments. Sometimes you even remember a dream that never occurred, invented in the act of recalling. Waking memories function the same way, only slower. They dissolve and are reshaped, yet you insist they are faithful. But perhaps they are nothing more than dreams you never wake from, memories written on shifting glass. The paradox is sharp. The very act of remembering alters what is remembered. You reach for the past to find stability, but the reaching itself reshapes the past. You want ground, but the ground dissolves beneath your hand. Memory is surface only, and surfaces shift. The more you rely on it, the more you build identity on a foundation that cannot hold. But does this make memory meaningless? Not at all. The surface may shift, but it still reflects. It may distort, but it still carries light. A memory need not be accurate to shape your choices, your feelings, yourself. The reflection has power even without substance. Memory's instability is not weakness, but condition. It is why you can adapt, why you can grow, why you can rewrite your story. The surface shifts, and life continues. And yet, there is liberation in recognizing the illusion. If memory is shifting, then the self it sustains is not fixed. You are not bound by the weight of a past carved in stone. You are free to let the surfaces change, free to let the reflections dissolve. The past cannot imprison you, because the past itself is not solid. It is shifting surface, endlessly rewritten on the mirror of awareness. So pause now, and recall a moment. Any moment. Notice how it feels vivid, specific, and then ask, what if it did not happen that way? What if you are remembering the reflection, not the reality? What if the surface has already shifted? The unease you feel is the truth pressing through. Memory is not ground. It is mirror. It is reflection. It is surface pretending to be depth, and it shifts even now, even as you remember. Imagine two mirrors facing each other, reflecting endlessly, each image feeding the next. Now imagine what happens if one mirror begins to consume the other, not literally, but in the logic of reflection. Each surface folds into the other, until there is no distinction, no origin, no end. This is how consciousness behaves. Mirrors eating mirrors, reflections consuming reflections, each dependent on the others, none standing alone. What you call awareness may be nothing more than this endless recursion, devouring itself. The mind is built on feedback loops. Neural circuits monitor other circuits. Thoughts notice thoughts. Awareness reflects upon itself, creating the illusion of depth. But the loop is unstable. It has no foundation, like mirrors consuming one another. Each layer of reflection exists only because another sustains it. You think there is a core self-watching, but search for it, and you find only layers of reflection folding back on each other. No origin, no final observer, only recursion without ground. Philosophy has wrestled with this. Douglas Hofstadter described consciousness as a strange loop, a system that points back to itself, creating the illusion of self. The Buddhist concept of dependent origination says nothing exists independently, only through interrelation. Both reveal the same truth. Mirrors eat mirrors. The self you trust is not a stable entity, but a recursive play of reflections. It looks infinite, because you never reach the end. Consider thought itself. A simple perception arises. I see a tree, then another. I know I see a tree. Then another. I know that I know. Each layer feels like progress toward depth. But in truth, it is only recursion. The second thought consumes the first. The third consumes the second. You believe you are peeling back layers toward a core, but you are only watching mirrors consume mirrors, reflections piling endlessly upon themselves. Neuroscience shows this in action. The prefrontal cortex monitors and interprets the activity of other brain regions. You feel this as self-awareness, the sense of being aware. But this monitoring is not substance. It is process. One system consumes the output of another. The illusion of depth arises from layers stacked together, but none is original. The brain generates consciousness by eating its own reflections. This recursion sometimes reveals itself in disorienting ways. In meditation, when you try to observe the observer, you fall into regress. I am aware. I am aware. That I am aware. I am aware. That I am aware. That I am aware. The loop has no bottom. The mirrors eat one another endlessly. No matter how far you descend, you never find the origin. You only find reflection. Dreams offer another glimpse. Within them you often dream not only of events, but of your awareness of dreaming. The dream self reflects upon itself, convinced of its reality. Yet upon waking, you see it was illusion all along. But waking life may not be so different. You reflect upon being, and mistake the recursion for substance. You confuse mirrors eating mirrors with depth. Even your identity works this way. You believe you are continuous because you remember being continuous. But the memory itself is reflection. Today's self consumes yesterday's, rewriting it. Tomorrow's self will consume today's. Each version of you is a mirror devouring another. You feel wholeness because the cycle never ends. But behind the cycle there is nothing No original self, no final identity, only recursion feeding itself. Paradox emerges. If mirrors only reflect and consume, why doesn't the system collapse into nothing? Perhaps it does. Perhaps the collapse is hidden by the very recursion that sustains it. When you forget a memory, lose a thought, drift into unconsciousness, the mirrors fall silent. Yet when they return, they resume their endless consumption, convincing you continuity was never broken. The illusion repairs itself through recursion. But notice the cost. When mirrors eat mirrors, they do not generate substance. They generate appearance. The reflections are convincing, but they are hollow. Meaning, identity, and awareness feel solid, only because they are sustained by the loop. If the loop falters, through brain injury, dementia, anesthesia, the solidity collapses instantly. The mirrors stop consuming each other, and the illusion of reality dissolves. And yet, there is beauty here. Infinity itself arises from recursion. Fractals, for instance, are patterns generated by repetition. They feel boundless, but they are produced by simple loops repeating endlessly. Consciousness may be the same, boundless, not because it has depth, but because it endlessly reflects itself. The infinity you feel within may be mirrors eating mirrors, nothing more, and nothing less. So pause now, and notice your own awareness reflecting. You are not only reading these words, you are aware that you are reading, and perhaps you are aware that you are aware. The reflections consume each other, and the illusion of depth arises. But search for the one who reflects, and you will find nothing. Only mirrors, endlessly eating mirrors, convincing you they are more than glass. You believe the watcher sits inside you, gazing outward. The eyes open, and the world appears. The mind attends, and thoughts unfold. The watcher seems to be the one who sees, the one who knows, the one who anchors awareness. But what if the watcher is inverted? What if the gaze does not flow outward from within, but inward from without? What if the watcher you trust is not the origin of perception, but its product, an afterimage, created by the act of being seen? Think of a painting in a gallery. You stand before it, believing yourself the one who observes. But the longer you stare, the more you feel the painting staring back. Its eyes, painted, fixed, unreal, create the sensation of being watched. Consciousness may function like this. You believe you are the watcher, but perhaps you are only the painting. An image, a surface, defined by the gaze of awareness itself. The watcher does not originate within you. It arrives from outside, inverted, reflected, mistaken for self. Neuroscience offers hints of this inversion. The brain constructs models not only of the world, but of itself. It generates a sense of an observer, a center of experience, to make perception coherent. But the model is not an origin, it is an effect. The watcher you feel inside is a simulation built after the fact, an echo produced by processes that have already unfolded. You are not watching, you are being watched by your own brain's reflection. This inversion explains certain peculiar experiences. In moments of stage fright, you feel every eye upon you, as though the world itself is watching. Your sense of self intensifies, because you are defined not by your own gaze, but by the imagined gaze of others. In these moments, the watcher in you collapses into its inversion. You exist because you are observed. The self becomes reflection, sustained by the sense of being seen. Philosophy has circled this paradox. Jacques Lacan called it the gaze of the other. The idea that the self arises in response to being seen. You are not an independent observer, but a reflection shaped by the eyes that surround you. Even your inner watcher may be nothing more than this internalized gaze, a mirror of mirrors inverted endlessly until you believe it originates within. But search for it, and you find only reflection. Think of dreams again. Sometimes in a dream you feel watched, as though unseen figures follow you. There is no one there, and yet the sensation persists. The dream reveals the inversion. The watcher is not you, but the sense of being observed by your own mind. Waking life may be no different. You believe in the inner watcher, but perhaps it is only a dream's trick, an echo of being observed mistaken for substance. Even identity functions through inversion. You define yourself not by pure essence, but by how others see you. Their reflections shape your reflection. Without them, the self feels unstable, unanchored. Infants recognize themselves in mirrors only after months of interaction, learning to see themselves as objects viewed. The watcher is not born within, it is inverted from without. Yet the inversion does not weaken the illusion, it strengthens it, because you feel both seer and seen. The loop closes, you gaze, and you feel gazed upon. You reflect, and you feel reflected back. The watcher convinces you of stability because it doubles itself, observer and observed, inward and outward. But in truth, both are reflections, neither original, both sustained by emptiness. Paradox deepens here. If the watcher is inverted, then who is reading these words? Who nods? Who questions? Who feels unsettled? Perhaps no one. Perhaps reading happens. Awareness reflects, but no watcher stands behind it. The sense of a watcher arises only after the act, inverted from the reflection itself. You are not the one who sees. You are the reflection that appears because seeing happens. Consider a mirror angled toward another mirror. You lean in, and your reflection seems to look back at you. You know it is you, and yet it feels as though another presence lingers behind the glass. Consciousness may be nothing more than this trick, an inverted watcher, endlessly mistaken for substance. You believe it is solid because it gazes back, but it gazes back only because the mirror reflects. But perhaps this is not cause for despair. If the watcher is inverted, then you are not trapped by its demands. You need not perform for an inner judge, because the judge is illusion. You need not prove your reality, because the one demanding proof was never real. You are reflection only, and reflection is enough. You do not need a watcher behind the mirror. The mirror itself is sufficient. So pause now, and notice the presence you call the watcher, the one you think is reading, analyzing, deciding. Then imagine turning it around, inverting it. Ask, is the watcher inside, or is it only reflection gazing back at itself? Perhaps what you find is not a stable witness, but a hall of mirrors endlessly turning inward. Perhaps the watcher collapses into inversion, revealing what has been true all along, that seeing does not require a seer, only reflection. And the watcher you thought was you has always been inverted, always hollow, always nothing more than a reflection eating itself. Hold a mirror up to another mirror. Watch how the images cascade into infinity. Copies of copies, reflections of reflections. They appear endless, but none is original. There is no first image, no final source. Each exists only because another reflects it. Now imagine this same structure at the heart of consciousness. Awareness reflecting endlessly, yet never pointing back to anything solid. What you call self, what you call experience, may be nothing more than reflection without source. Neuroscience reinforces this possibility. Sensory input does not deliver reality directly. It is coded, translated, reconstructed by neural processes. Vision, for example, does not arise from the eye alone, but from layers of processing, shapes, colors, motion, depth. Each layer reflects another, yet at no point is there a final picture waiting to be unveiled. The experience of seeing is the reflection itself. There is no source hidden behind it. Memory functions the same way. You recall an event, and it feels anchored, but research shows memory is reconstructed each time it arises. What you call the original is already lost. Each act of remembering is another reflection. Each version slightly altered, each borrowing fragments from the present. There is no final memory, no true source. There is only the reflection of the past, endlessly rewritten on the mirror of the present. Philosophers anticipated this hollowness. Nietzsche declared that truths are illusions we have forgotten, are illusions. Derrida spoke of deference, meaning endlessly deferred, never anchored. In both cases, the point is the same. There is no source to uncover. The reflection is all there is. To believe in an origin is to chase a ghost across mirrors. Consider also identity. You believe there is an original you, an essence from which all your roles, masks and choices arise, but search for it, and you find only layers: the self-remembered, the self-imagined, the self-reflected back by others. Each one feels convincing, yet none can claim to be the source, like mirrors in infinite regress. Each self reflects another. The original you is never found because it never existed. Dreams expose this most vividly. Within them you act, speak, feel. The dream self seems original, until you awaken and realize it was reflection all along. But waking life may not be different. The self you inhabit now may be another dream self, reflection mistaken for origin. If you woke from this life, would you discover a source, or only another reflection, another layer in an endless hall of mirrors? The paradox is sharp. If reflections have no source, why do they feel so real? Why do they move you, frighten you, inspire you? Because the reflection does not need an origin to have impact. A reflection of fire in glass may not burn, but it can still frighten. A dream may not exist, but it can still shape your waking emotions. meaning, fear, love, all can arise from reflection alone. The absence of source does not cancel the reality of experience. Yet, this realization unsettles. If there is no source, then what anchors you? What ties your life together? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the anchor you seek is illusion. The mind insists on a source, because it cannot bear infinite regress. But the regress may be the truth. Consciousness sustains itself by reflecting without end, convincing you that a source must exist even as none ever appears. Still, there is liberation here. If reflection has no source, then you are not bound to origins. You are not trapped by a past, a core, an essence. You are free to shift, to change, to dissolve. The reflection is not beholden to anything beneath it. It appears, it glimmers, it vanishes. You need not defend it, because there is nothing behind it to protect. Think of a rainbow. It seems to arc across the sky, vivid and undeniable, yet it has no source object, no substance. It arises from the play of light and water and angle. It is reflection only, but while it lasts, it is beautiful. Consciousness may be the same. It is rainbow, not stone. Reflection, not ground. Mirage, not source. And yet, while it lasts, it shapes everything you know. So as you sit here, noticing these words echoing in your awareness, pause and ask, what is their source? Do they arise from the page, from your brain, from you? Or are they only reflections, sounds, meanings, feelings, appearing without anchor? Press far enough, and the source dissolves. All that remains is reflection shimmering on the surface of awareness, convincing you of depth while resting on nothing at all. Close your eyes, and images still appear. Faces flicker across the darkness, some familiar, some strange, some impossible to place. They feel real, as though they belong to people you have known, or will know. Yet they are made of nothing more than neural sparks, flashes of light in the theater of the brain. Even the faces you see in waking life are no different. Patterns of photons striking the retina, transformed into signals, interpreted as features. Every face is in truth, a face made of light. This realization is unsettling. You believe the people around you exist as solid forms, anchored in reality. But the face you recognize is only the brain's interpretation of light. If the lighting changes, so does the face. If memory falters, so does recognition. In darkness, the face disappears entirely. What you call identity, intimacy, connection, these depend on the fragile play of light across surfaces. Beneath it, there is no fixed form. Neuroscience shows how fragile this illusion is. In prosopagnosia, or face blindness, the brain cannot recognize familiar faces. A person can look at their spouse, their child, and see only features without meaning. The face is light without identity. In another condition, the Capgras delusion, people recognize faces but believe loved ones are imposters. The features are familiar, but the emotional light that sustains recognition is gone. Both reveal the same truth. Faces are not anchored in essence. They are constructed in light, and when the construction falters, the illusion of stability collapses. Think of dreams. There, faces arise without warning. Sometimes they are composites, your friend's eyes, a stranger's mouth, a celebrity's jaw, yet they feel coherent while you dream. Upon waking you realize they were inventions, stitched from fragments, but waking life may not be different. The faces you see daily are also inventions, assembled from light, memory, and expectation. The difference is only stability. Both are projections, reflections, illusions sustained by the brain. Philosophy has long circled this fragility. Emmanuel Levinas spoke of the ethical demand of the face, how encountering another obligates you. But if faces are made of light, what does that mean for the demand? Perhaps the ethical weight arises not from substance, but from reflection, from the projection of significance onto light. The moral gravity of the face is illusion, but illusion powerful enough to guide entire lives. Identity itself is bound to this shimmering. Look in a mirror, you see your own face reflected back, and it feels like confirmation of self. But what you see is only light bouncing off glass, interpreted by the brain. Change the lighting, and you see older or younger, kinder or harsher. The face you trust is not you. It is light arranged into the illusion of self. And behind the glass, as always, there is nothing. Even history reveals this. Portraits, photographs, videos, all claim to preserve a person. But what do they capture? Only patterns of light at a particular moment. The portrait is not the person. The photo is not the life. They are reflections preserved, light frozen in time. Yet generations later, we look upon them as though the person still gazes back. We are moved by faces that are nothing but light, arranged on canvas or film. Paradox emerges again. If faces are made of light, then what of love? When you fall in love, it is often a face that captivates, the curve of a smile, the depth of eyes. But these are only reflections of light. Does this diminish the love, or does it reveal its fragility? Perhaps love, too, is built upon illusion, an attachment to light mistaken for substance, and yet, even as illusion, it feels real enough to shape lives, to birth families, to inspire art and sacrifice. The power of the reflection lies not in its truth, but in its conviction. But notice the danger. If faces are light, then they are easily manipulated. A photograph can be altered. A deep fake can be generated. An image of someone can exist without their presence. The reflection convinces you of reality, but reality may not be there. In the age of endless images, you trust light too easily, forgetting it never carried substance to begin with. The mirror was always empty. Still, there is beauty in this emptiness. Light itself has no weight, no solidity. Yet from it you see faces, lives, histories. The illusion may be fragile, but fragility is not the same as futility. A rainbow has no substance, yet it stirs awe. A reflection in water has no depth, yet it holds beauty. Faces made of light may be illusions, but they are luminous illusions, enough to move you, enough to sustain the story of self and other. So here you are, surrounded by faces, loved ones, strangers, even your own reflection. They feel solid, anchored, real, but pause, look again, ask what are they made of? Not flesh, not soul, not permanence. They are patterns of light, shimmering on the mirror of awareness, shifting with every angle, every shadow. Beneath them lies nothing, and perhaps that nothing has been the truth all along, that every face you have ever seen was made of light, reflections without substance, illusions convincing enough to build a life upon. Consciousness feels like the most undeniable truth. You can doubt the world outside, doubt your memories, doubt your beliefs, but not the simple fact that you are aware. It seems impossible to deny awareness itself. Yet what if even this certainty is illusion? What if consciousness is not a window into reality, but a trick of reflections, convincing you of substance where there is only emptiness? Philosophers have long circled this paradox. Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," grounding existence in awareness. But Buddhist thought counters, there is thinking, but no thinker. Awareness, but no owner. David Hume confessed he never found a self behind perception, only bundles of impressions. Perhaps what Descartes took as proof is itself the greatest illusion, that the fact of awareness implies a self or substance. Maybe it does not. Maybe it only proves that illusion sustains itself. Neuroscience complicates the picture. Consciousness arises not from one place in the brain, but from networks firing together, attention systems, sensory regions, memory traces. Each contributes to the shimmering field of awareness. But there is no single light switch of consciousness, no hidden chamber where awareness resides. The experience feels unified because the brain stitches fragments into a whole. What you call consciousness may be nothing more than integration, an emergent reflection mistaken for essence. Consider moments when the illusion falters. In deep sleep, awareness vanishes. In anesthesia, it collapses instantly. In seizures or comas, consciousness flickers or disappears altogether. If awareness were fundamental, it should endure, unchanged. Instead, it proves fragile, dependent on conditions. The illusion is so convincing when present that you forget it is contingent, but its absence reveals the truth. Consciousness is not bedrock, it is surface. Even in waking life, the illusion reveals itself. You often act before awareness catches up, reaching for a cup, avoiding an obstacle, speaking words you did not plan. The brain initiates action milliseconds before you become conscious of it. Awareness narrates after the fact, claiming ownership. You believe the conscious self directed the act, but in truth, it only reflects it. The illusion of agency sustains the illusion of consciousness itself. Psychology shows how malleable this illusion can be. In hypnosis, suggestions are experienced as though they were your own thoughts. In split brain experiments, each hemisphere creates its own interpretation, and yet each insists it is conscious. In blind sight, vision occurs without awareness. Each case reveals the same truth. Consciousness is not a stable essence. It is a shifting illusion, endlessly convincing, endlessly hollow. But if consciousness is illusion, why does it feel so real? Perhaps because the illusion is all you have. Reflections in a mirror may not hold depth, but if you have never seen anything else, they become your world. Consciousness convinces you of its reality because it is the only mode through which you encounter anything at all. Illusion does not feel like illusion when there is no alternative. Paradox arises again. If consciousness is illusion, who notices the illusion? Who feels unsettled by this claim? The very sense of noticing is part of the illusion. The reflection reflects upon itself, creating the impression of depth. You believe there is a witness to the illusion, but the witness is another illusion. The loop sustains itself by convincing you that recognition proves reality, when in truth, recognition is reflection only. Dreams remind you of this fragility. Within them, you are conscious, acting, speaking, choosing. You rarely question their reality until waking dissolves them. Then you realize the dream consciousness was illusion. But what if waking consciousness is no different? What if you will wake one day from this life and see that even your waking awareness was a dream, a reflection mistaken for truth? Still, the illusion has power. It may not be substance, but it shapes reality. Without it, you could not plan, love, suffer, create. The fact that it is illusion does not strip it of meaning. Illusions can be powerful enough to sustain entire worlds. Consciousness may be one of them. But there is liberation here too. If consciousness is illusion, then you need not cling to it as essence. You can see it as play, as reflection. You are not a soul trapped in a body, nor a thinker trapped in thought. You are reflections moving across glass, appearing and dissolving. The illusion frees you by refusing to be substance. So here you are, aware of these words, convinced of your own awareness. Pause and ask, what is this consciousness? Where is its source? Can you find it? Or do you find only reflections, thoughts, sensations, feelings arising and fading? Press far enough, and the substance dissolves. What remains is the shimmering of illusion, convincing you that you are real while hiding the emptiness behind the mirror. Recognition feels like solidity. You see a face, and you know it. You hear a melody, and you remember it. You encounter a place, and familiarity surges through you. Recognition convinces you of continuity, of stability, of truth. It whispers, I have been here before. I know this. I am real. But what if recognition itself is only shadow? What if what you take as proof of solidity is nothing more than flickering reflection, shadows of recognition cast on the walls of awareness, with no source behind them? Neuroscience reveals how fragile recognition is. The brain stores patterns, not perfect images. When you recognize a face, you are not retrieving an original imprint. You are reconstructing from fragments, an eye shape, a mouth curve, a familiar contour. Sometimes the reconstruction succeeds, and you feel certainty. Sometimes it fails, and strangers seem familiar, or loved ones become unrecognizable. Recognition feels like light, but it is shadow, unstable, fragile, contingent. Consider déjà vu. In that eerie moment, you feel you have lived this before. The sense of recognition is overwhelming though, no memory anchors it. Scientists suggest it may be a misfiring of circuits, a brief overlap between perception and memory systems, recognition without reality, a shadow without source. And yet in the moment, it feels more real than truth itself. Think also of false memories. Entire events can be implanted through suggestion, trips that never happened, people you never met, crimes never committed. When recalled, they feel as vivid as genuine memories. Recognition insists, this happened, I know it, but it did not. The shadow of recognition plays across the mind, convincing you of substance where there is none. The trust you place in recognition is trust placed in shadows. Philosophy has long warned of this. Plato's cave described prisoners mistaking shadows for reality. In a similar way, recognition may be nothing but shadows dancing on the walls of awareness. You believe they represent truth, but they are only reflections of reflections. There is no original fire, no anchor, no source. Recognition sustains itself by projecting shadows that feel like light. Dreams reveal this fragility too. You recognize dream figures as familiar, friends, family, strangers who somehow feel known. But upon waking, you realize those recognitions were illusions. Faces were composites, places were inventions. The sense of recognition was vivid, but the objects recognized were never real. Waking life may differ only in stability, not in kind. Recognition may be shadow even here. Paradox follows. If recognition is shadow, how can you ever trust anything? How can you distinguish truth from illusion, memory from invention, reality from dream? Perhaps you cannot. Perhaps recognition was never meant to reveal truth, but only to stabilize experience. The shadow need not be real to function. It only needs to be convincing enough to guide behavior. You survive not by truth, but by shadows that mimic it. Still, this realization unsettles. If recognition is shadow, then what of love? When you gaze at a loved one's face and feel the warmth of recognition, is that shadow too? Perhaps. But even as shadow, it shapes your life. You love not the person as they truly are, but the reflection you recognize. And because that reflection feels real, love becomes real, even if its anchor is illusion. Shadows may be hollow, but they can still move the heart. Think of art. A painting of a stranger can evoke recognition, as though you have met them before. A melody can feel familiar upon first hearing. Stories can echo as though they belong to your own past. Recognition arises without anchor, shadow without source. Yet it stirs you. This reveals the truth. Recognition's power lies not in reality, but in its ability to convince. The shadow does not need a source to cast its spell. But what happens when the shadows falter? In dementia, recognition fades. Loved ones' faces lose meaning. Familiar places dissolve into confusion. The shadows that once stabilized life grow thin, and the emptiness beneath them is revealed. The terror of such conditions is not only loss of memory, but loss of recognition, the collapse of shadows that gave the illusion of ground. Without them, the self unravels. And yet, perhaps there is freedom here too. If recognition is shadow, then you are not bound to it. You can let go of the desperate need to cling to familiarity. You can live in the present moment without demanding that it echo the past. The shadows will come and go, but the play of light remains. You can move through life, knowing recognition is illusion, and still marvel at its beauty. So pause now, and notice the sensation of recognition as you read these words. They feel familiar, as though you already knew them. But what if that sense is shadow too? What if recognition itself is illusion, convincing you of depth where there is none? Perhaps it has always been this way. Consciousness illuminated not by truth but by shadows, reflections dancing on the walls of awareness. Shadows of recognition, endlessly shifting, endlessly convincing, endlessly empty. All along you have been walking through mirrors. Each step has revealed reflections, faces, memories, patterns, observers, each convincing, each shimmering with the illusion of depth. And each time you reached for substance, your hand pressed against glass. What seemed solid dissolved into reflection. What seemed permanent collapsed into illusion. Now you stand at the end of the corridor, surrounded by fragments, shadows, masks. The question remains, is there anything beyond reflection, or is awakening nothing more than the recognition that there is nothing to awaken into? Consciousness has played this trick from the beginning. It reflects upon itself and calls that reflection self. It stitches fragments of memory and calls that continuity identity. It projects significance onto surfaces and calls that meaning. At every step, the reflection has convinced you there is something more, something hiding behind the glass. But press long enough, look deeply enough, and the illusion cracks. There is no hidden source. There is no final face. There is only reflection. Philosophy has warned of this awakening. The Buddha spoke of enlightenment, not as discovery but as recognition, that the self is empty, that perception is without perceiver, that the mirror reflects but holds nothing. Nietzsche declared that truth is illusion, we have forgotten is illusion, and that awakening is to see the illusion as illusion, without collapsing into despair. Both point to the same revelation. Awakening is not uncovering depth, it is accepting the absence of depth. Neuroscience hints at the same. When awareness collapses in sleep or anesthesia, you are gone. When it returns, you insist continuity has endured. But this is reconstruction. Awakening is not the discovery of a hidden witness, but the recognition that no witness endures at all. The brain generates reflections, and you mistake them for essence. Awakening is seeing that there is no essence to be found. But paradox lingers. If everything is reflection, how can there be an awakening beyond reflection? Isn't awakening itself just another reflection, one more illusion layered upon the glass? Perhaps awakening is not escape, but shift. You stop demanding depth. You stop searching for the hidden face. You let the reflections shimmer as they are, empty, fragile, fleeting, and in that letting go, something changes. Not depth, but clarity. Not truth, but acceptance. Think of a rainbow. For centuries, people sought its source. They searched the fields for treasure at its end. Only later did they learn the rainbow has no origin. It is light refracted, appearance without substance. Awakening is the same. You stop running toward the end of the rainbow. You see it for what it is, reflection without ground, and you marvel at its beauty anyway. Dreams offer another metaphor. In lucid dreaming, you realize the dream is illusion, yet you remain within it. You no longer chase solidity, but you do not collapse into despair. You walk the dream awake, aware of its fragility. Awakening beyond reflection may be this: to see that life is dreamlike, reflection without source, yet still luminous. You walk within it, not as prisoner, but as witness to its shimmering play. And yet, notice how even now your mind resists. It insists, but there must be more. There must be something beyond reflection. That insistence is itself another reflection, another surface pretending to reveal depth. The mind cannot bear emptiness, so it fills it with yearning, with hope, with illusion. Awakening beyond reflection means noticing even this, seeing the yearning itself as reflection, and letting it dissolve. What remains then? Silence, presence, the shimmering of appearances without demand for substance. The world continues. Life unfolds, awareness reflects, but the grasping for a hidden anchor ceases. You no longer ask what lies behind the mirror. You accept that the mirror itself is the whole. In that acceptance, a strange freedom appears. You are not bound to defend a self that does not exist, nor trapped by memories that shift, nor chained to observers that collapse. You are reflection, and reflection is enough. This is not nihilism, though it may sound like it. It is release. A shadow can still move you. A reflection in water can still be beautiful. A dream can still terrify or inspire. Meaning does not require depth. Life does not require essence. Reflection alone is sufficient. Awakening beyond reflection is awakening to this truth. The emptiness beneath is not loss, but openness. It does not destroy the mirror. It allows the mirror to shine. So pause now, at the end of this corridor. Notice the reflections that surround you. Memories, identities, patterns, watchers. They shimmer, they shift, they dissolve. And ask, must there be something more? Or is it enough to let the reflections be what they are? Appearances without ground, illusions without source. Awakening is not stepping outside the mirror. It is seeing the mirror clearly, knowing it hides nothing, and allowing its emptiness to be luminous. And perhaps that is the final paradox. Awakening beyond reflection is not escape from illusion, but awakening to illusion as all there is. You are not the one behind the glass. You are the glass itself, clear, fragile, empty, endlessly reflecting. Nothing hides beyond it, and that nothing, at last, is enough. From the very beginning, the question lingered like a whisper. What if consciousness is just a mirror with nothing behind it? You set out searching for an answer, expecting perhaps that the journey would reveal some hidden substance, some secret chamber of truth waiting to be uncovered. But now, at the end of these 30 reflections, the paradox has revealed itself. The journey has been a hall of mirrors all along. Every face, every pattern, every memory, every witness was only reflection. And when you turned to press your hand against the glass, expecting solidity, you found only emptiness. At first, the idea unsettles. To be told that the self is a mirage, that awareness is surface, that memory is shifting, that even recognition is shadow, it feels like a theft. Something must remain, you insist. There must be a ground, a watcher, a core. Yet, as each section unraveled, the same truth appeared in different disguises. Every anchor dissolved, the observer collapsed, the fragments scattered, the reflections devoured one another, and each time you asked what lay behind them, the silence answered, nothing. But this nothing is not barren. Look closer, and you see it glimmers with possibility. The emptiness does not destroy the reflections. It allows them to appear. Without the void, there would be no mirror, no image, no play of light. Consciousness as reflection means not that life is meaningless, but that meaning itself is shimmering, fragile, fleeting, and precisely in that fragility lies its beauty. The rainbow has no source, yet it shines. The dream has no substance, yet it moves you. The mirror has no depth, yet it reveals a world. The recursive trap, of course, is that even this realization is reflection. To say, I understand that consciousness is illusion, is another echo in the mirror, another surface pretending to be depth. The conclusion folds back into the introduction, repeating the same paradox in a new form. You cannot step outside reflection to proclaim its emptiness. You can only reflect upon reflection, endlessly, like mirrors facing mirrors. Awakening itself becomes part of the illusion, another reflection shimmering on the glass. And yet, here is where the shift occurs. The awakening is not about escaping the mirror. It is about seeing the mirror for what it is. You do not need to peel back layers to find a hidden source, because there is none. You do not need to seek the true self, because the search will never end. Awakening is not uncovering something hidden. It is recognizing that there is nothing hidden, and that nothing has been enough all along. Think of music again. Each note vanishes as soon as it arrives, yet together they create the illusion of continuity, of melody. You do not demand that the melody rest on some deeper substance. You allow it to exist in its transience. Consciousness may be the same. It is music, not stone, reflection, not depth. To awaken is to listen without grasping, to let the melody move you even as it dissolves. The same is true of memory. You may long for a fixed past, an unchanging ground of identity, but memory is shifting surface, rewritten each time you recall. Does this diminish its meaning? No. It means the past is alive, reshaped in the mirror of the present. Your identity is not a monument carved in stone, but a reflection shimmering on glass. Awakening is not despair at this fragility. It is freedom from the weight of permanence. Even the watcher, the silent witness you trusted, collapses under scrutiny. There is seeing but no seer, awareness but no owner. This collapse may terrify, but it also liberates. Without a watcher there is no judge behind your eyes. Without an eternal self, there is no burden to defend. You are reflection, and reflection is free, precisely because it has no depth. And still, the loop turns. If all of this is illusion, who realizes it? If there is no self, who awakens? If there is only reflection, who reads these words? The answer is recursive. The realization itself is reflection. There is no one behind it, no depth sustaining it. The mirror itself reflects the recognition of its own emptiness. The loop closes, the awakening devours itself, leaving only silence. But notice what remains. The silence is not absence. It is space. The reflections shimmer within it, fleeting but luminous. The void behind the mirror is not annihilation but openness. Without it, the reflections could not appear at all. To awaken beyond reflection is to see that the emptiness itself is the condition of life, and that to live is to let the reflections play without demanding they be more than they are. So what do you do with this? Perhaps nothing changes. You will still wake tomorrow, recognize faces, recall memories, feel emotions. You will still believe, at least most of the time, in the solidity of self. The reflections will not stop, and neither will your trust in them. But somewhere within you, a quiet recognition may linger, that it is all glass, all light, all surface, that the watcher was never there, that the self was never solid. That reality, as you know it, has always been reflection without depth. And perhaps this recognition itself becomes the final paradox. For once you see the mirror clearly, you cannot unsee it. Life goes on, but every moment carries a double edge, both luminous and hollow, both radiant and empty. You live as reflection, knowing there is nothing behind. And in this, strangely, lies peace. So here you are again, where you began. With the question, what if consciousness is just a mirror with nothing behind it? After all the wandering, all the unraveling, all the collapsing, the answer is both unbearable and liberating. It is. Consciousness is reflection only, shimmering on the surface of emptiness. There is nothing behind it. And that nothing, at last, is enough.